All right, it's live. Let me check the chat before I mute my mic. Okay, we're live.
Okay, cool. So, yeah, we have an anarchy and statism debate going on, and won't waste too much time. If the anarchists would like to go first and just make their general opening points and statements, then they can go ahead whatever order they want or however long they want.
Do you want to go first, Rebel?
Yeah, hold on. I gotta fucking get my phone onto a charger.
Do you want to go while he's charging his phone, or?
I can go if you want me to.
It doesn't matter.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I have 3 questions that I guess you guys can answer after our side speaks. But the 3 questions I have, do you believe it is justified to use violence on someone that hasn't committed an act of aggression? Would you condemn anyone who defended themselves from an aggressor? And are those in government exempted from your own morality?
Fair enough.
Capitalist American, those should sound pretty familiar.
Yeah, Larkin Rose. He was the one that actually originally converted me to an anarchist for a while. So yeah, no, I've heard those before. If you guys want to go ahead and finish up your opening or what you guys believe.
I mean, it's pretty simple what anarchists believe. You just don't think that illegitimate force is allowed to be used against people who haven't committed violence, and the more it's less likely that you're ever going to have, I'd say impossible, that you're ever going to have a free, virtuous society if the foundation of that society and the political movement is founded on force. I think that you have a right to your body, you have a right to your own labor. Nobody controls you. You don't control anybody else. It's pretty simple. It's all grade school shit where, you hear, oh, you shouldn't be a bully, and nobody agrees with being a bully, or nobody agrees that you should be able to steal from people and things like that. But as soon as you slap a government label on it, then, you're absolved of your sins and you can't really do anything wrong.
Anything else, or you guys have anything else you want to throw on, or you guys have a few minutes if you want to?
Okay, I could. Let's see here. Well, I agree with everything Rebel said, and I think there's 3 things that you have to take into account when you're talking about anarchy, and that is self-ownership, property rights, and there has to be voluntary association. And if you can't have voluntary association, if you don't own yourself and you don't have property rights, then you're nothing more than a slave.
Okay, so I guess we'll go back and forth and we can take turns kind of digesting what you said. I can go first. Just going through a few of the things you said. I've noticed you've watched some Larkin Rose. That's always interesting. One of the things you mentioned, though, kind of around the general array of the entire basis of what Larkin says and kind of what was stated earlier is regarding violence, regarding aggression. One of the things I would mention, though, because this is often stated is, statism, it's violence. I don't think that's actually correct. I think with human nature, you do have violence, and I think it would be absurd to state that without a government, you would just be somehow more virtuous. The reality is you're going to have violence regardless, whether it's from a state or whether it's from other people. It's a part of human nature. It's something that's always existed. I think it's a very hard-pressed argument to present or try to argue for the case of absolute morality. I also want to get into a few other points regarding violence. My first question, I'll ask you guys a few questions. Would you agree monopolies generally underprovide their services? I would imagine you would. You're not anarcho-communist, so you have at least some basis of economics. Which would then bring my next point is, why would you want a competition of violence? Why wouldn't you want a monopoly of violence? And then I guess the last part I would bring up is the impractical nature of anarchy, which is one of the big reasons why I ended up abandoning the movement. It's simply nothing. It's not something that could realistically happen on any sort of practical scale within the United States. I know Rebel talked about withering down the state. The issue I have with that is the same issue I have with anarcho-communists or Marxists who want to wither away of the state. You can't create a state and then expect it to magically wither down. In fact, when I was an anarchist, that was an argument I used against minarchists, is you're not going to wither down the state. So I eventually came to the conclusion, okay, you can't gradually just tear the state down. It would have to essentially happen instantaneously, which doesn't really have the best track record. If you look, it has happened before, but yeah, the governments have completely fallen on their faces, like what happened in Somalia. The socialist government essentially crashed on itself. But yeah, I generally find it impractical. I don't think you can set up a situation where you can realistically implement such a system. And that's my fault, or that's my thoughts. And I don't know if you want to add anything to that, or I don't want to hog the entire talking time.
Does Isaiah want to speak?
Yeah, sure. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
All right. So,
Well, actually, you mind, before I forget what Brian said, you mind if we, respond to what he said and then
You want to take notes?
free market. Well,
I
yeah,
can...
I'm standing outside. I just don't have a piece of paper.
that's fair. You can respond. No, wait.
But
after.
then free market, like after, or Isaiah, after I'm done and Chandler responds too, then you can ask any questions too. I don't want to cut you off.
No, that's fair. Go ahead.
So I'd say the first part of what you said with the violent human nature, I don't necessarily agree that humans are naturally violent towards one another. I don't think all people are. I think there are some. But the problem is that when you monopolize that violence and you set up an organization that has complete reign over any violence or any force over a given geographical area, that's when you start to get into real problems. And yes, monopolies do undersell their product. But the problem is that, like I said, with the government, they've got a guaranteed tax stream. And the reason that you wouldn't see so much violence in a competitive market is because violence is very costly. And destruction costs money. And so if these companies that, these, I guess, military contracting companies or law enforcement agencies that would sprout up in an anarchist society, if they have to compete for money and they still have to meet that bottom line, it's very unlikely that they're going to be, bumping up their expenditures and spending money on trying to destroy or whatever they could. But then what was the last thing that you said?
Oh, that it's impractical.
And I don't think Chandler or I are arguing that anarchy is something that's going to happen overnight, and maybe it never happens. The problem is we're not arguing it from a practicality standpoint. You can take the consequentialist theory, David Friedman, but that's just sort of the perfect society in our minds. And yeah, you're not going to make it overnight. You have to educate. There's things that have to happen, or else you just get a market for governments, and people are going to demand one, and there's going to be a supply that meets that demand. But I think that Chandler would agree with me, and you can say if you don't, smaller government is always better. And if you've got the end point being no government, and people demand smaller and smaller government rather than bigger government, I'm happy with that. I just think that anarchy is the most moral system that you could possibly create.
Okay, you can go ahead and say what you need to say, and then I have a few points I could add to that afterwards.
Me?
No. I was
Isaiah?
talking to Isaiah.
Oh, all right. Well, I'm going to actually go on for a couple of minutes here, just providing my case and then actual
That's fine.
responses to some of the arguments made. So,
Go ahead.
just to be clear, had a brief stint for a couple of months as a anarcho-capitalist. I considered myself more of the Hoppian branch until I eventually gravitated over to the propertarianist perspective, and that's sort of where most of my empirical and scientific critiques of anarcho-capitalism come from. So just to begin, the very basis of anarcho-capitalism focuses on property rights, voluntarism, NAP, and capitalist organization. So my general rejection to this organization is through 3 points. It's that the fallacy, if you will, of the NAP as well as the IVP, intersubjectively verifiable property, does not in any way function as a rational basis for forming legal polity within an anarchic structure. Secondly, that anarchists, anarcho-capitalists place an incredibly high value on reducing aggression as opposed to increasing trust, and also that property in and of itself is not intrinsic or argumentative. It's sort of actually socially derived from implied contracts as well as interpersonal threats of violence. And just to kind of wrap this up here, I believe it was, I want to say it was Rebel who said that violence is very costly. I would actually disagree insofar as failing to suppress parasitism is a lot more costly, and that you tend to have, what we have now in this country is we have a lot of low trust types, and we have a lot of free riding on the commons, for example, and even at the voting booths. As a general pattern of wealthy distribution as a perfect example of this, and that the state as itself acts as a monopoly on violence within geographical region, in this case, America, to assist us as a society in suppressing free riding, and that it is definitely a lot in a society, if you do not have any means to cooperate, you are going to result to free riding. The society will absolutely devolve, and without any sort of rule of law structure or threats of interpersonal violence, you get a massive free riding on the commons, and as a result, I completely disagree with the anarcho-capitalist perspective, and I just like to take a moment to outline two actually rather stunning examples of anarcho-capitalist successes. There was the Jakarta court in Indonesia, which canceled its the world's biggest water privatization after an 18-year failure of 2015. Water production as well as water resource allocation, was incredibly low, and residents in this region failed to have their water needs met. I also like to go over to evolutionary Catalonia. This was an absolute disaster. What you saw here was you saw priests shot at, you saw the working class enslaved by the union bosses, and Marxists had their brains experimented on. So I wouldn't exactly consider anarcho-capitalism to have a great track record. Even the anarchists take in any sort of practicing or even implementation of its viewpoints or principles to have any sort of backing. And voluntarism, this is the big one. Voluntarism in and of itself sounds great. It's a pretty big part of the libertarian doctrine, but it has no rational basis whatsoever. An action does not become beneficial when it's voluntary. It's merely moral. You can have absolute free riding under the NAP and IVP. There's absolutely no way to suppress parasitism in its fullest extent, and as a result, it is practically and empirically impossible to limit the demand for the state under the anarchist framework, and as a result, you'd have a state coming back within a few years, if not a few months. Under any example whatsoever, there's really no sort of contest to this sort of organization. And that's pretty much basically all I have to offer for now.
If I could just add a few points real quick. The two main parts we were kind of going in before, just a little bit ago, was basically about violence and whether or not it's practical. As for the human nature, I feel you strawman me a bit. I'm not saying all humans are inherently violent, but what I am saying is human nature is there's part of violence within it. And What I mean by that is violence will always exist within humans, regardless of other variables, regardless of what religion, where you're from, whatever. There will be some extent of violence. Now, I would argue Islam is far more violent and breeds more violence than other religions, for example. But the point remains is violence is within human nature. If you look at our evolutionary track record, violence is within our human nature. I don't think there's any solid rebuttal to that. And then the other part you mentioned, which I thought was interesting, was you're saying you're not arguing from a practical point of view. And in a way, I feel you're almost conceding to a nirvana fallacy. In a sense, you're admitting it's not possible, but what if? I'm not particularly interested in what if. I mean, there's communists that argue, well, what if it was just implemented perfectly? What if we just had the perfect dictator? What if the state did wither away? Well, that's wonderful. You can keep having those discussions, but in the practical world, it serves me of no value. So I don't find that particularly interesting. And yeah, I would agree with his opener in terms of, resisting parasites within society, people that bring society as a whole down and such.
Chandler, you want to say something, or you want me to go?
Well, I want to say that I think that believing in the state is kind of a form of parasitism, because you're saying that basically I'm going to vote for somebody, and then and that person is going to go and initiate aggression against these innocent people who haven't, done violence themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say that you said that voluntarism wasn't practical because of what you call parasitism. But I'm wondering, what sort of parasitism can you possibly have if there's no state? I know you brought up water. I don't know anything about the water example that you just brought up. I'm not going to be able to speak on it, and I don't want to say anything because I really don't know. But the idea that you can have, or that you need a state to get rid of parasitism, like Chandler sort of alluded to, seems weird to me, because under anarcho-capitalism, you're not going to have social safety nets. You're going to have to pay for every good and service that you use. So I don't know where you're coming from with that, but the whole Catalonia thing, that was far from anarcho-capitalist. They were super communist, or super influenced by communism. And I think that's a bad example. They weren't capitalist. They were influenced by Marx. In Catalonia?
You're rejecting the anarchist perspective that the anarchist groups didn't have pretty much practical control of Catalonia in 1936 and so on and so forth?
Well, when you say anarchist, we're talking about anarcho-capitalism. We're not talking about, anarcho-syndicalism or communism like Catalonia was. Yeah. It wasn't capitalist. But then the other thing, violence is always going to exist. People are going to get mad, and people are going to, try to fight one another. What we're saying is that it shouldn't be something that's monopolized or allowed on a grand scale, like it is with the state. Without the state, you're not going to have things like World War I, World War II, hundreds of millions of people being killed by their own governments in democide over the 20th century alone. People, might get into fights on their own, but it's not going to be anything like you see nowadays. And the nirvana fallacy, we're not saying what if. We're saying that that's the moral end state. And I didn't say that I don't think, well, I kind of did. I think that anarchy is not something that we're going to have here in, tomorrow or 10 years or maybe even 100 years. But I don't think that human beings, if we're going to make it to the next stage of human evolution, that it's going to be through a government, or that it's going to be, with an all-powerful state that, controls that monopoly over violence. I think it's going to be something where humans are interacting on a voluntary level, or on a voluntary individual level. And we're moving away from, all the evils that the state commits. But Chandler, I don't know if you have anything to add.
No, I agree with everything you just said. The state is the largest perpetuator of aggression and violence. And so it only makes sense to reduce that amount of violence, especially if you consider yourself to be a moral character. So
Okay.
Can I respond, Brian?
Yeah, I'll go right after you.
All right, so I'm going to jump into parasitism afterwards, but I just have one question for now, and that is, how do you in any way plan to construct the market for commons under the anarcho-capitalist framework?
Well, like what?
Yeah, explain what you're asking.
Commons like land, air, water. How do you make a market for those in the anarcho-capitalist framework?
Well,
You don't make a market. It just happens.
Markets are platforms in which voluntary exchange
There's no market
occurs.
for air right now. Like, air is one of those things that nobody's selling or.
Yeah, you can't own.
Right. But what I'm saying though is that without this state, who's going to be distributing water? Is what I'm asking. You're going to have to privatize the commons at some point in time to allocate these bases.
I could get in my car and drive the 3 blocks to 7-Eleven and pick up, a big old gallon jug of water, and like there's utilities
companies went
that
under
have
opportunity cost for that water. So what I'm saying is, if you privatize this river, how are you going to regulate that market for it? That's what I'm asking.
What's that?
If you privatize this river and all land on the anarcho-capitalist framework, as Hop argues, how are you going to regulate this market?
Well, I don't understand how you think that water, people are just going to be hoarding water. Like,
I'm saying it's going to be privatized, and how do you stop hoarding if it's privatized?
Well, because people want money.
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, people want money and people want water. So I think that you're making a big deal out of something that I don't think neither Chandler or I think that there'd be, water hoarding and shit like that. There's 72% of the earth is covered in water. Like, it's not really something that you can corner the market on.
Mm-hmm.
So
what I'm saying though is that when you privatize the commons, and that what we've all undergone opportunity costs to obtain,
and real quick, I just want to
become a significant problem when you start to privatize this, because under the anarcho-capitalist framework, there is no state. All goods, services, and commodities are allocated privately. There's no state to form this basis for it, and as a result, I need an example on how this is going to look.
And real quick, I just want to say real quick, you mentioned a lot of the earth is water, 75%. Yeah, but the majority of that is ocean, and it's not really drinkable. Actually, if you look at the stats, very few it's fresh water that you can actually drink. It's like 10%, I think. So it's not quite that much. Just throwing that out there.
Okay. But then you also don't think that, under anarcho-capitalism, it would be possible for somebody to try to develop some sort of desalinization process to take the salt out of the water?
Yeah, that's already happening now.
Yeah. I mean, so as for the commons question, are you talking about we've got utilities that are already set up and they're public?
That are state provided as a natural monopolies. I'm asking, how are you going to replace these? For the example, the Jakarta court example failed. So I need to know how you're going to make that example not fail in the future in our society. That's what I'm asking.
And why did it fail? Like I said, I don't know anything about the Jakarta court.
Neither.
Because you can't privatize the commons, and you have massive greed and tyranny under that system from corporate owners.
So the corporate owners that you were just saying, did they work for the state? Did they get these trusts from the state? What was the state's?
Well, if they're corporate owners too, they're recognized by law, which means they're from a state.
Yeah, was it like a state-run monopoly that they granted to these corporations? What happened? You got to give us some backstory.
They were privatized, as in the market handled this. And sorry, not corporate, I mean company, excuse me, because corporate or state-run entities. But so companies bought these rivers and lakes and so on and so forth out from Indonesia, in the Jakarta region. And as a result, these companies were the entities, the businesses that allocated water for residents in this region. And as a result, water production absolutely plummeted. And a lot of, I believe it's something, I forgot what the percentage, I think it's like 25, 28%, I think it was, of residents in this region suffered from dehydration over this span for at least some extended period of time.
So, but you're saying though that there was a state in this, like it was cooperation between the state and the private corporations, right?
I mean, just because the state existed
water
doesn't
was
mean it's
privatized.
particularly relevant.
Well, yes, it is.
Water
though.
was in the private
is,
sector,
though.
not public sector.
Because when the state exists along with other private businesses, the private businesses can just, buy whatever laws and stuff they want to benefit themselves and hurt the consumers.
The problem with something like water, it's not something you can just build in a factory. So that's something that's already there. And I mean, I guess you can crange rainwater. Exactly. It's a very poor to try to compare that to something else. Like, for example, drugs. That's something that, I think would be, something government can definitely cause the prices to go up on. Well, something like water, you can't just make a drug or make water the way you would make a pharmaceutical drug. They're not comparable. And I just want to address a few things really, really quick that was mentioned earlier before we get too far off. A few wars were mentioned earlier. However, to imply that those would not happen logically would also mean there would be worldwide anarchy. There would be no other government around that would invade neighboring anarchist states. There wouldn't be any conflict. That seems awfully utopian, that billions of people, many of whom completely have different moral codes than us, would just accept the non-aggression principle, anarchy, capitalism, a lot of people that hate capitalism out there, and conform to the capitalist way of life. It seems incredibly utopian, and I think that's a very, very difficult position to argue for. I just simply don't see it being feasible. You mentioned it's not really a nirvana fallacy, but I would be interested in a specific example on how you plan on getting there. I don't find gradualism to be a particularly convincing argument. And I think especially why a lot of former anarchists take kind of the propertarian view, you have to acknowledge a state is going to be there. And that was the big thing for me. There's going to be a state, no matter how much you post on Instagram, no matter how much of Larkin Rose you watch, whatever, it is going to exist. And regardless of your moral code or whatever, it's going to be there. And while we have this state here, it should be used properly, because my view of government is that it's similar to a gun in the sense that it's a tool. It can be used for very bad things, but it could also be used for good things. In this case, stopping low trust individuals, for example, from entering the country, stopping people that come in whose ideas completely reject basic form of libertarianism, things we would probably agree on, things of those nature. So those were a few things I wanted to add real quick before we got too far off topic.
Okay, just quickly. So the Jakarta thing that you've been talking about, it sounds a lot like what sort of happened in Flint, that the government handed over a monopoly to a private business. That's not a very good example of capitalism or anarcho-capitalism, because
it failed.
Well, no, not
was
because
the property,
it failed.
was it justly received, the property?
Yes, I assume they purchased it. I don't think the government just gave the land away. Someone probably purchased it.
But the government didn't receive that land legitimately, did it?
Well, it doesn't really matter. How would you stop that? Yeah, I mean, that's somewhat subjective. And also, regardless of whether it was government or someone homesteaded it, I mean, it's somewhat irrelevant to the effects of it.
Okay, well, what I was going to say was this private company basically took over the government's monopoly. I doubt that the government, sold off bits and pieces to all these different companies. I bet it was just one, and I can't say anything.
Water operators.
It was
what? It was more than one water operator for this utility. It was more than one.
So that sounds like, though, like in Texas where I am, you've got these private utilities that deal with electricity, that they all know that they have a monopoly over certain towns and certain counties and neighborhoods and things like that.
If you have multiple operators in a region, how is that a monopoly?
Because, so say like one county, Dallas County, is Encore Energy, right? I'm pretty sure that when you get over into Fort Worth, and then a few other of the surrounding cities in the Metroplex, it changes companies. And these companies know that they can't go into Dallas because they don't have the monopoly, the state-sanctioned monopoly there, and the Dallas companies know the exact same thing about going into the Fort Worth area. But another thing that like 75% of water or whatever it is, and then only 10% being fresh. Talked about the desalinization, drinkable. So I work in construction, and one of the things you see a lot of people doing, especially like when I was little, I lived on a ranch. Like we had our own well, right? There's underground water, all that stuff. I think you guys are kind of making a big deal about nothing, and something that's very easily fixable. I don't know where we're not on the same page with that.
I just have a big issue in how you plan to suppress free riding, because my main argument is that's what's going to bring the demand for the state back. That's my main argument.
So with free riding, how would there be free riding if you want water, so you buy from, this person that has a well on their property, or this water company or whatever?
The issue with that is it's within a vacuum. You're not within a vacuum, though. You have a society with a state. Essentially, every society has a state currently, and you don't have that situation set up. You don't have a utopian society set up specifically for an anarcho-capitalist society. So, for example, in the United States, if you just had borders that completely fell and you let in immigrants from wherever, or you let in refugees from wherever, you're letting in people who reject basic forms of liberty.
Okay, but what tool are they going to use to take away my liberty? It's not like they're going to be,
Okay, well,
it's
is the
not like
state
the
there, or
refugees
where
in
did it
Europe.
go?
Well, it's not like the refugees in Europe that are leeching off welfare.
The issue I'm having is that you're putting that within a vacuum. That's not going to happen, though.
What are you talking about?
What bill do you propose to end the welfare state? I'm fascinated to hear it. And also, how do you plan on getting people on both sides to support that bill? It's not going to happen. It's going to be there. And once you realize that and you work towards the best way, you see that the idea of just throwing it all out isn't going to be very practical.
So you're basically
the problem with what you guys are saying is you're recognizing the injustice.
No,
but then
I'm saying
you're
that
saying,
it's
it's always going to be
nothing
there.
we can do.
I'm saying it's impractical. I would love to end the welfare state. However, until you provide me a realistic example of how you specifically plan to do so, you're going to have to use the government as a tool. That might mean stopping people coming in who would lead soft welfare, who would vote for far larger government than any of us want.
I don't necessarily have a huge problem with that.
That requires a state, does it not?
No, but that doesn't mean I don't mind using the state in order to shrink it, but it's not like there's other ways to do it, but I don't, I'm not entirely opposed to building a more high trust society.
Yeah, what would you do when those walls fall down?
You can be opposed if you want your capital society to work.
No, so the difference of where we all are, I think where Chandler and I are, and then where you guys are, you recognize, I know both of you recognize individual liberties, you recognize the free market, things like that. Where I think we differ is that Chandler and I see, you've got this state run on violence, you've got all these injustices, we should try to change them. What would be the perfect system? You logically deduce that, well, if these are the foundations of morality, this voluntarism, individual property, these individual rights and things like that, and you sort of go as far down the rabbit hole as you possibly can, you're going to get to a stateless society because the state contradicts all of those things that we just said.
Let me kind of present your argument in a way that maybe is a little different, but it's based on the exact same logic. Cancer is very bad. It would be really awesome if we had a miracle pill we could take and cure you of your cancer at any point, and that would be cool. The issue is that doesn't exist. That might mean you need, for example, chemotherapy at the moment. It would be great if it did, but again, that's not a reality, and you have to work within reality. You can't just be naive and morally blinded to the real world in which we live in. The idea of European, or the idea of, in fact, that's almost an example on your side, because a cure for cancer, in my opinion, is far, far, far more feasible than that of worldwide anarchy overnight. I just don't see it being feasible.
We
whatsoever.
don't think anarchy is going to occur overnight. But I did have a question for you.
Well, hey, really quick, you mind if I just say?
Go ahead, Rebel.
So that cancer analogy that you brought up was perfect, and I don't think you realized it.
I know. It's the minarchist thing. You remove 80% of the tumor or something like that. I've heard it before.
So, like, you're saying, so take the cancer analogy. You two are saying, oh, you've got cancer, like we've got chemo, we'll stick with chemo.
No, I'm regarding to society as a whole, not necessarily.
So just hold on. Chandler and I, on the other hand, are saying, oh, we've got cancer, this is bad. Like, find the fucking cure. Like, there's a better way to do things. Right. We need to get past this chemotherapy crap. But
then you'll die.
I was gonna bring, like, use the chemotherapy. We're saying use the chemotherapy, but you should be looking further on down the road, not just what's working here and now, but what's the best possible solution. And I was gonna use another one earlier, that, like, smallpox back when was, you said earlier something about government.
I don't remember anything about smallpox,
like World War I, and no, this was just what I was gonna say. Like World War I and World War II, like, not happening without a state. You said it was just like some anarchist utopia.
That would require worldwide anarchy, yes.
And
essentially,
what I'm saying is that you sort of missed the point of what I was getting at with that. Like, all of these things, all of these atrocities, the concentration camps, the fire bombings in Dresden, the nuclear bombs dropped in Japan, like, these are all
thousands of lives.
Okay, well, these were all made possible by the state, like these weapons of mass destruction, things like that. I just
weapons of mass destruction was made because of physicists that realized how atoms worked and whatnot. The state took advantage of that. I give you that.
Absolutely.
And ultimately, did it not save lives? Do you deny that dropping the atomic bomb saved lives, saved money?
So
yes,
I completely agree with you there.
So yes,
the problem
it's an act of an aggression, but it worked.
Okay,
you can argue morality.
I agree with you. I agree with you about, like, the nuclear bombs saving lives. If we would have had to mount a land invasion of Japan, a lot more people would have died. The problem is, like, I'm saying we shouldn't be in this situation to begin with as humans. Like, we should be dealing with each other on individual basis, not collectivizing into these big groups.
That would require essentially global anarchy, would it not? You don't want a giant authoritarian government right across the pond. They might tax you.
I mean, I disagree with that too. I think that anarchy can start off small and, just grow.
I definitely agree with that. Anarchy can start off small.
And you plan to expand that globally, do you not? Billions of people accepting the NAP? And you think that's realistic? Do you think communists are going to automatically just accept the NAP? You think they're going to accept?
Well, I think that when you're using realistic, you're interchanging it with, like, easy. Like, do I think it would be easy? Happen? No, I definitely think it could, and I think it should in the future.
Landing on Mars is what's difficult. Convincing a communist about basic economics.
No, and I think it will.
Have fun with that. I've tried for a while.
You can't. I mean, all jokes aside, you can't outrun truth.
Why are you an anarcho-capitalist? If you can't outrun truth, your ideology is completely in contradiction to truth and in promotion of it.
Where is it? All right, let's fucking straw man the shit out of this. Where am I contradicting myself?
Yeah.
If you're concerned about truth, why do you support the NAP under the umbrella of IVP for an anarchic legal basis?
You don't just accept the NAP; it's universal.
Empirically or rationally? In what sense? Logically?
This is from Capitalist American's YouTube channel that I was just watching a video on.
Okay, I was an anarchist for a little while.
I know, and you said that morality is not subjective, that morality is objective, and that the NAP is universal. Those are your words.
Well, yes, I would have said that when I was an anarchist. I'm not an anarchist anymore. I mean, we're not, basking so well when he was a Marxist. But in terms of that, morality may be objective, but that's not the reason why I would have an issue with it. It's because your perception of morality is so incredibly subjective. Even if you're an objectivist, you can't deny perspective of morality is completely subjective. Objective morality is an interesting philosophical debate, but in the purpose of government and anarchy, unless you have a good argument presenting why the perception of morality is not subjective, then it's pointless. Because if you implement something like the NAP or non-aggression or capitalism, people will have totally different interpretations. Marxists, for example, would view workers being exploited as immoral and acts of aggression. You have, even within the anarchist community, you have so many different perceptions. Should we physically remove people? Should we not? That's the issue.
Mm-hmm. And that's the argument, and that's what we're trying to.
No, the argument is that because
that's why we're having this conversation in the first place.
The argument is because the perception is subjective, it's not going to be universally accepted. And I think it's
maybe not very specific things, but I mean, I think everybody agrees, you shouldn't kill people or steal from them.
Well,
yeah, and so there's a difference.
I would disagree with that. It happens a lot. You have people that rob other people. It happens.
And
okay.
People kill other people.
But there's a difference between moral perception and moral, or reality, right? Like I would say, yeah, people can have a different idea on what morality is. Everybody can have their beliefs, but if it doesn't coincide with reality and it has to reject reality in order for it to work,
how do you objectively prove that your perception of morality is the objective one? Because that's what you're going to have to prove to people if that case is going to stand.
Okay, morality is objective.
That's not the argument.
That's what you just asked.
No, perception. How are you going to objectively argue?
So you change the perception by educating people and explaining to people.
The perception doesn't matter. Like you can have. So
you're just going to keep posting on Instagram, and that's going to change everyone's opinion. Communists are all of a sudden going to.
Well, I mean,
people that reject.
I used to be a leftist, so don't try to say that if you're a leftist, you can't.
You're a leftist at probably like 13 because you sound like you're about 16 now. That's not a big deal.
Okay, and so I was a fucking neocon, and then I joined the military, and I saw, there's a lot of shit that's fucked up with this whole state thing, and I just slowly started to move down to the bottom right.
That's completely anecdotal evidence.
And okay, that's what we're trying to get at is that.
But that's a fallacy.
I'm trying to get at. So hold on, let me talk. Your perception doesn't fucking matter. Like
it does.
No,
you act on perception.
Hold on, Brian, let him finish.
Listen,
I want to respond.
So your perception, like you. Through your own observances, believing in something, like doesn't change the reality part. And morality, in definition, is like the foundation of how humans should act with each other and what creates a maximum of human survival. And what we're saying is that to get to this, you have to take things at the individual level, like individual property rights, voluntary association, free individual sovereignty, all these things. And then you expound upon that and you move up to set up what you believe is the best system. And that all has to be debated inside an open market for
let me make one quick point. And then, let me make one quick point. You're an atheist, correct?
I am.
Are you?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, so you believe morality was a product of evolution, correct?
Not really. I mean, what do you mean by was a product of evolution?
So you kind of, I'm sure, are aware of kind of the debate of where morality comes from. It's an interesting philosophical debate. Some people say it comes from a higher power, a sense of authority. Others would say it was a byproduct of evolution. Assuming you're an atheist, I would imagine you would say it came from a process of evolution, seeing how you don't believe in a higher power, and there's nothing wrong with that.
I mean,
that's
I
wrong.
believe it came from a higher power in terms of like the universe being the higher power, but I don't think it's really
What?
evolution. Like this is it universally. You're accepting.
What?
What are you talking about?
Universe
saying
gives you a
what
sense of
for?
morality. Because a universe exists, you have a set of morality. I just haven't
No,
heard that
because
one
I'm
before.
looking at how people have to interact with each other in order to do what morality and ethics is set out to do. Is set up.
So presumably, you presume.
Right, you
Okay,
talk.
we'll put it this way: it was presumably a natural process. It didn't come from a higher power, right?
Yes. Okay.
And you would say evolution branches off and gives different varieties, does it not? That's why we have.
Oh, are you talking about?
I don't see how this is relevant. Can you get to the
Because
point?
if you have different varieties within species, why wouldn't you have a different perspective of morality? If it's not, why would that be the only exempted case of variety within a species?
Okay.
In
I
which
see what you're
case,
saying.
that refutes the universal morality claim. The only way you would argue that would be if you
But you're
believe
saying
a
with different
common creator.
species, though.
Not even from different species, even in our species, we see it. There's changes within humans. Humans are so vastly different. Blue eyes, that's a differential in evolution. You know, there's a mutation. The color of your hair, the color of your skin, that's all products of evolution.
So what do you think? Where do you think morality comes from then?
I'm Catholic, so I believe it comes from a higher power, but that's just a personal thing.
Okay.
It's neither really here or there, but that's just my perspective. But what
So
I'm arguing
I just don't really think it matters where you think it comes from. It just is.
Well,
it just exists.
If you argued it came from a higher power, then you would have probably a more legitimate form of saying of universal morality. But if it was a byproduct of natural processes, which it's a fair argument, there's a lot of evidence for that, that would seem to imply you would have variation as a byproduct of evolution. And that somewhat refutes universal morality.
Well, I mean, certainly there's going to be people who do immoral things, but that doesn't negate the fact that certain things are moral and certain things are not.
How do you determine?
I think that we're okay. I think I get where you're coming from. So you're saying that like evolution, you know, the universe has created all of these different species and things like that, and that's similar to human beings creating all these different sorts of moral codes?
No, I'm saying if morality is a byproduct of, for example, evolution, then it would only be logical to then conclude you would have varieties within morality.
But I don't think that morality is a byproduct of evolution.
So you believe it comes from a higher power?
I don't think
that
those are the only
childhood and environment as well. That's kind of my belief, really.
I don't think that it has to come from either of those two things.
Well, and he made a really good point. It could be from the environment, but if that's the case, it's also not universal because there's different environments.
Yeah, morality really isn't universal. I mean, I personally think that it's somewhat subjective and relative, to be honest, which is kind of why murderers exist. Morality isn't universal.
I mean, it's fair. It's like morality is it's like a philosophy degree. It's kind of useful.
But I mean, I guess the big issue I have is that I don't know why morality is being argued. And I mean, I understand that you think that aggression is inherently immoral, but my question to that would be aggression against what exactly is immoral?
Aggression against moral agents.
Moral agents being defined as?
Moral agents, I believe Rothbard defined moral agents as people who can form an argument. And actually, that was Hoppe. But people who can form an argument. Those are
so I guess, would it be aggression against...
Go ahead, what?
Would it be aggression against rights that's immoral, or aggression against norms that's immoral?
Aggression against rights.
Mm-hmm.
So there's nothing immoral in your view in aggression against social norms and geographical and cultural norms in any way?
I don't... Explain yourself before I answer.
If you are going to confine aggression being immoral in your sense and suppressing it only to rights, you then have to deal with the free riding again. Here it comes again with the free riding on the commons in our norms. So, for example, if you are going to say that violence against just rights is immoral, and it's that libertarian creed from the dogmatic libertarian ideologues that I don't really care what you do as long as you don't infringe upon my rights, well, then it comes to how do you define your rights? Because at the end of the day, you have your norms. You have, so for example, in this country, for example, which is civilization as a whole, we value markets, liberty, limited government. Even as Brian was saying earlier, there are definitely individuals around the world who do not share that view. There's obviously in-group preference. You have low IQ, rushing to the means, and you would definitely have your low trust types in this society, and they would definitely infringe upon your norms, and they're doing so now. And with the state, we can at least support these individuals with the anarcho-capitalist framework. There really isn't any wiggle room to suppress them from creating a demand for the state and floating opportunity costs, if you get what I'm saying.
So a lot of this is that I kind of get what you're saying. So a lot of this too is us believing, like, I guess the subjectivity that you guys were talking about is that people like Chandler and I believing that the individual rights are more important than the society, like all those things that we've already talked about.
Where do rights come from? Are they inherent?
Yeah.
Critically prove it.
Oh my God. Okay, we're getting. Let me.
I'm asking you to prove that natural rights exist.
All right, let me make my point first, and then I'll
Go
come
ahead.
back and do that. So what we're saying is that we believe that this is the best way that humans could live, and so you set up, or people just start to educate people and convince them that you're correct, and then it's sort of like setting up your view in a market, and then if people like your view, like they come towards it, and if they don't, then
Can I ask you a question?
your view dies. Yeah, what's up?
How do you plan to uphold a libertarian society without the state?
In what way?
That doesn't make
General
any
question.
sense. Explain that.
Property rights, enforcing those after what property comes from implied contract and threats of interpersonal violence.
Well, I have a 45 pistol sitting right here next to me, so we'll start with that.
Well, I mean, that's
Right,
wonderful.
but nobody cares about your rights if you can't defend them from other groups. This is kind of the problem with Crusoe's Island as exploiting property, is that transforming possession into property requires contractual or implied contractual agreement with other groups to defend your said possessions from other infringements and refrain from action on taking those. So, for example, you argue that you have the right to self-ownership, but in the Marxist society, with work on the production, the collective, your blood cells, tissues, organs can be stripped for vaccines. So self-ownership isn't really empirically there, if you get what I'm saying.
Well, it's not an empiric deal. It's you setting up a universal maxim that if people operated like this, the human race could survive. So
then how do you do that without a state monopoly on violence in the courts?
okay, so I gotta address something else you said before this. Fuck, what was I getting at? So we were talking about like individual rights and how you have them. So there is an element of can you defend your individual rights? You have to be able to defend them to keep them, but it doesn't mean that just because you can't defend them, they're not there.
Well, no, they're not there because the society, the collective, will infringe upon them and they'll disappear. Because rights are ultimately reduced to property, and property comes from agreement.
Right, but you're asking me to prove empirically how the individual rights. I don't even speak English right now. You're asking me to prove how individual rights exist, and how you don't have ownership over another person. But then I'd ask the same thing back at you. How do you prove that you have a right over my body or over my labor, things like that?
I reject the notion. Hold on, I reject the notion of positive rights. I don't think they exist. But with that being said, rights definitely come to the society at hand. This is kind of why we have somewhat universal rights worldwide. Not exactly, but we have some. right to free speech, right to life, so on and so forth. But with that being said, the right to life is preserved by the state. Obviously, murder is illegal. The state preserves this right, and the state forms the basis for this right.
But
And
the
in
state
actual-
commits mass murder, so that doesn't make any sense.
Legality doesn't equal morality. Like apartheid was legal, the concentration camps were legal.
I'm not arguing
things like that.
Slavery was legal.
I'm not arguing that legality is. When did I ever argue that?
You just, what do you
You're
mean?
saying it
I'm
comes
saying
from the
to say that
state.
person
You're saying
rights.
that it comes
Right,
from
because rights come from the state. That the state preserves rights. Yes, that's not saying.
So
that
you're
that's,
saying that if slavery was legal today, then you would be okay with it because the rights come from the state, right?
That's not what he's saying whatsoever.
what?
That's basically what
That's
you're
what
implying.
That's what I'm hearing. What do you mean that's not what you're saying?
The right to slavery? What?
You're saying that rights come from the state.
Rights are preserved by the state, but they're formed in contract from collective groups.
Well, we would
The
say
state preserves them.
we
They
would,
wouldn't exist in the absence of the state. They wouldn't exist.
well, no. So Chandler and I think I don't want to speak for you, Chandler, but you would agree that, like, the United States, for example, was set up to preserve your rights, correct?
Yeah.
Like, do you agree with that, Isaiah? Do you agree with that, Brian?
Government was set up to preserve rights, but they were formed in contract by the founding fathers, hence the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and so on and so forth.
But those same rights, the government didn't give them to them.
But they
And
preserve and defend them.
Other people didn't give you your rights. According to the founders, they were certain unalienable
rights aren't
from your
really
creator.
given. Exactly. That's not really how rights work.
I agree with you.
There's a difference between giving and preserving.
I completely agree with you. They're not giving you them; they're preserving them, and in saying that, they're already existing.
Yeah.
Like nobody else gives you your rights.
That's not what we're not arguing.
It's not that any individual gives your rights. It's that this right comes to the actual surface and actually means something when you go with collective groups who agree to preserve your rights from other infringing groups and competing groups. In a hunter-gatherer society, where did the right to life exist?
What's that?
In a hunter-gatherer society, where did the right to free speech exist? Where?
Can you say what you want?
In a hunter-gatherer society, where did the right to free speech exist?
It's not like I'm
Did it
saying
exist?
that okay, they weren't outlined in some hunter-gatherer like constitution.
Right, they have to
or
be
anything
to mean
like that.
something.
They're already there. Like you saying whatever you want to say. Your
Okay, so
words
then how did those rights get there? How did they get there? From God?
We're moving into like
I
this
don't-
existential argument.
Yeah,
But I'm
of,
asking,
like,
how are rights self-evident
inherent.
inherent is what I'm asking.
we're saying that they're there, and
I'm asking you, who put them there? How are they there?
they are naturally there. Whether you think that it's from a creator or from
Because
something
I'm a
else.
human being, I have rights. That's your argument?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
And what this is goes into empirical evidence. You do realize this, yes?
And that's why I said it's universal, or it's given to you by like the universe. You are. I don't know how we came to be. But
How does the universe allocate?
The universe
rights?
doesn't
What?
give a shit about your rights. It's a non-existent thing,
It's
or it's an existent thing.
completely
It's a
neutral.
He's
non.
saying it is inherent to being a human being. That's what he was claiming.
But where's
Yeah,
your proof
you-
for this?
you
This is
control
subjective
yourself.
this is conjecture. Where's your proof for this?
Where's my? Okay, I am standing here right now. I can say whatever I want into this phone, whether or not I'm going to be punished by the state or whoever for saying what I'm saying it doesn't matter. I'm saying I could say fuck, bitch, ass, cunt, like whatever, and I have a right to free speech. I can say what I want to, whether or not it's punished is.
Would
Like
your right to
society.
free speech
It's really
actually
based on
mean
the state.
something with no state? Would it?
Hmm?
Would the right to free speech mean something with no state? Who would respect that? Who would inherently respect that right?
I don't know if somebody's gonna hit me over what I say.
Will leftists not?
Well, we both agree there. But
Right. So the argument that you're making is that people are going to magically reject thousands of years of evolutionary strategy and group preference, and you're going to take low IQ, low trust individuals, toss them in your society and your private borders, and they're going to voluntarily associate and respect your rights and not create a demand for the state. Do you see the problem with this? Or
So we're chasing each other around in circles, because what I'm saying is that, like, people's like, how are you going to do anything against my rights without a state? Are you going to, like, attack
Can
me
I not form
over
a group if I could collect a collective group of people from my neighbors and take your property? Can I not do that without a state?
Well, you can try. I mean, at that point, like, I'd
If
shoot
you're
back or
one
whatever.
person and I round up 10 neighbors, we're going to take your property. I'm sorry.
Not without a fight, is what I'm saying. But,
I
like,
mean, they could like
But you're
burn the
still going to
house
lose.
down. They could.
I mean,
What I'm saying,
they
though,
could
what I'm
still do that
getting at here,
in a society with a state, though, and you still have to defend yourself because the police aren't going to arrive till after the crime has already been committed.
but the police are still there.
Okay,
My
but you can
argument
still
is
have
that
private
anarchism,
police.
Come here,
my
Missy.
argument is not that the state, I don't like the lesser of two evils argument. What I'm saying, though, is that I would rather live in Stalin's Soviet Russia than in any attempt to even BC medieval Iceland, because that failed. But anyways, capitalism is inherently flawed because the NAP is inherently flawed. It does not do, under IVP, it does not do what property rights are intended to do. As right, your legal system fails, trust declines, and the only people you would really have foolish enough to live in your society and cooperate would be pirates and thieves and looters. That's all you would have. Honestly.
How do you come to this conclusion?
Yeah, I'm very interested.
I'll go down the list. All right, so the NAP is a moral philosophy saying that aggression is inherently immoral. You say it against rights. Obviously, you allow for an absolute decay of social norms. You hold up individual rights as the champion of all things because the individual. Do you believe that the individual outweighs the collective?
Yeah.
I'm just going to ask this real quick. Are individuals? Do they not inherently form groups biologically, socially, and economically to form collectives? Do they not?
They can, but that's their decision.
Yeah,
Is
that's
class hierarchy
that's a voluntary. That's what we're talking about with voluntary association.
Is class hierarchy inherent or is it natural or state enforced?
Say that one more time.
Is class hierarchy natural, as in the capitalist take, or state enforced, as the Marxists proclaim?
I would definitely say it can be both, but there is a natural hierarchy if that's what you're
And
asking.
you agree with in-group preference, yes?
And say that one more time.
And you agree with in-group preference, yes? The evolutionary strategy?
Yes.
So then how are you going to get the collective to weigh less than the individual with in-group preference? How?
You're going to have to say that one more time. Sorry. What?
How are you going
last
to get
part.
the collective to mean less than the individual with in-group preference in your society? How?
The collect.
As in, with
understand what
collectivism,
you're-
how are you going to get collectivism to be, if you will, suppressed enough by having in-group preference? You have to suppress in-group preference, which is going to require a state in any inherent way. Diversity in and of itself creates conflict. So as a result, you would have to have an ethnically homogeneous, high IQ society for this to actually even have a chance of working. Because diversity and voluntary association do not go hand in hand, ever.
Diversity in what way?
Diversity
Like, what do
in
you mean?
skin
Cultural
color,
diversity,
ideology, IQ.
biological?
Diversity in skin color, IQ, ideology. Diversity in any sense, really.
Why does the skin color matter?
Because race and ideology are somewhat kind of linked, voting-wise, and
Culture.
Is it race that's linked, or is it culture?
both, actually.
Well, race.
I'll even argue this. Why? I'm going to take sort of a racist take. But the thing with blacks, though, is that hold on, bear with me here. After blacks first, so after Africa was first migrated from, you had your Europe and your Asia, right? And these were case psychology based environments, and that you had competition of resources. They were on islands in small continents. With Africa, you had a very warm climate, abundance of resources, and as a result, in Europe and Asia, what you had in Europe was zinc pacification, and you had a rather stress put on high IQ individuals, and competition wouldn't have gotten you anywhere. So to pass on your genes, you had to be high IQ, intellectual. There wasn't much fighting in Asia either, but in Africa, with the abundance of resources, finding a mate was based on who was the best warrior, who had relatively strong genes. The warrior gene is a pretty good example of this. This is why black is so dominant in basketball and sports in general. And so this is why blacks have low IQ. It's why Africa is a mess, because they have low IQ, and low IQ is linked to crime and poverty.
But is every black person inherently low IQ?
Well, I'm black.
There's
and
exceptions.
No, my IQ is off the charts, and Tom Stoll was That's not an argument. I mean, you can laugh, but what I'm saying though is that
no, it's just
Well,
like,
I mean,
I'm just thinking of somebody watching this, and you going, I mean,
Well, I
you
mean,
know,
there's
blacks
exceptions.
just have low
They're known
IQ.
for,
I'm
like,
black, but I'm off the charts.
on the collective whole, they do. Our mean IQ is like 85, or 80. Actually, it's like 75 actually.
And there's exemptions. I mean, for example, like what he brought up, you can find
Saul
incredibly,
Williams.
yeah, you can find incredibly intelligent people, and it's the same way anywhere. You can find incredibly athletic white dudes. I mean, it just
But the regression to the mean still pretty much debunks your comment.
exactly
They still gravitate towards that 85.
Yeah, exactly. There's exceptions, but I mean, are you going to look at that one thing over everything else? I mean, you could find one genius in an African tribe. That doesn't mean, they're
It wouldn't even last very
building
long,
a
to be
space
honest.
program.
Well, that doesn't mean you should. I don't want to get into this.
No, please, because you have to solve the problem to put out your society. It's a pretty valid question.
Well, I think that you can have black people, you can have people of different races and cultures in your society, as long as it's voluntary, as long as you both realize that you're not going to aggress against his rights and he's not going
But
to
how
aggress
is
against your
what's
rights.
voluntary, what's productive? You're putting more value on morality as opposed to actual benefit and economic gain.
So what you're saying though, like when you brought in the whole race realism thing, I don't understand how any of this matters absent a state.
You would need that. You would need that though if you want to remove the state and you want to be successful.
You would need an ethnically homogeneous, high IQ society for this to actually even have a chance of working. Even the alt-righters get this, and I can't stand the alt-right.
Why do you think that?
Are you familiar with the voting patterns in this country? With voting patterns and all that?
Okay,
I know what
you
you're
bringing up.
talking
I know what you're talking about, but you bringing up voting patterns, like that's using a state.
But you admit you need a state
Right,
to
but
remove the state.
you have to limit the demand for the state, and there is not a single shred of empirical objective evidence you can possibly provide.
Dude, I said it earlier. Like we agree that there's a demand for a state right now. What
And
you're
how do you
trying
reduce
to
that is what our argument
what
is.
we
How
are
do you
trying
reduce
to
that?
do-
Reduce that through education.
what we are trying to do is change consumer taste. Like we want to change what consumers want.
I mean, just
I wouldn't even call them consumers because
Well, I'm saying consumer because they're in charge of the demand curve, if that makes
If you
sense. I'm
want-
trying to make it
Hold on,
economic.
so education is key to
Yeah.
solving your issue.
then the thing with that is
Yeah, why is that bad?
when you look into education, you're not going to find too many anarchists with just elite everywhere. I'm sure there's a few, but you're not just going to have an anarchist in every single subject explaining why the state's bad. You might have minarchists or conservatives or whatever, but you would essentially need an anarchist teacher everywhere indoctrinating kids into your ideology.
And even then, it's not going to actually matter because it's not like education actually causes IQ to jump any measurable amount of points, to be honest.
Most of it's genetic.
It's like 70% genetic.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that what we need to do is we need to talk about how we believe that you need to get to an anarchist society. Because like we didn't talk about that at the beginning, and I think it's
Actually good.
I think it's causing a lot of like confusion, and we're all kind of talking around in circles. And I don't think that you understand our points, and I don't think we understand your points, or at least I don't. But so what we're saying needs to happen is like the first step is education. So we're just trying to shrink the state, and we think that one of the foundational tenets of our argument is that violence is inherently immoral. And we're saying that, like taxation, for example, you always hear that taxation is theft mantra. What we want to get is people realizing that they are better suited to solve their daily life problems than any number of bureaucrats inside of a fucking smoking room deciding what needs to happen for their lives. And so we're just
essentially what
trying
you
to
want
shrink.
is you want an education system that is required to basically teach to your ideology so you can brainwash the children to be
No,
anarchists.
when did
Not
we
at
ever
all,
say
dude. Not at all.
When
That's
did we ever say
not
that?
what I said.
You said you want education to promote
When
your
we say
ideology.
Dude.
when we say education, we mean having conversations like this with people, and you know.
So posting on Instagram and stuff. Because I
Well,
don't
I
think
mean,
that's
that's one of
very,
the-
Hold on.
I
Even
don't
if
think
you
it's very
have,
effective.
That's one of the
Dude,
methods. There's tons of methods, but
I definitely advocate for marketplace for ideas, but you're definitely overstating its effect. You're definitely
so
putting
hold
way
on,
too
hold
much
on.
value
Like,
on
That's
it.
the other thing.
So, like, yeah, we can laugh. Oh, you're just posting shit on Instagram, but every week, 200,000 people see what I'm posting.
Okay.
Like, that's doing a hell of a lot to.
I have over
fucking
3
educate.
million. I have over 3 million impressions. I've been an anarchist posting and I've been in conservative posting. I promise there's far more conservatives.
and
More
that's
people
why
are
you-
seeing
Yeah,
conservatives.
and okay, I'm not
So you're way
fucking
outnumbered.
flexing or trying to pull my dick out.
Well,
What
no,
I'm
I'm just saying
saying
you're
is that, like,
outnumbered.
when we say education, we're not talking state-sponsored education, like schools, indoctrination, shit like that. We're just saying we want to get people thinking, and we want to get people to start to see that the state does not have their best interest at heart, and that they want to
Right,
be
but
more in charge of their lives. They want to keep their earnings, things like that. A lot of it is centered around like taxes and bleeding the state, basically. We just don't want as much money going to the state. We want to take power away from the state.
Well,
I
And
think
we want
a lot
to
I want to.
do, but the
well,
problem
just
that I have,
hold on one second. So, just what we want is to get the message across that smaller state is better, and I think everybody in this chat right now, we all agree that smaller state is better, right?
Depends.
Like, you
on
don't
the
want.
size of it or what they're doing specifically.
Okay, so
You could have a small state that's very bad. You could have. It depends on what they're doing. I mean, that's a very general term.
Yeah.
Small. What do you mean by that? What does that mean? What are they in control of?
Well, when you have a bigger state, you have a higher risk that they're going to do something terrible. So,
Well, I mean, what is that state doing? That would be my question. Are they seizing the means of
they're
production?
and the other
Are
seizing
they-
means of productions, they're killing Jews, they're taxing people through the.
Well, that doesn't sound like a small government to me.
that's
No,
not.
but-
No, we're saying like that's one of the things that government is doing. We want to get people thinking about like, oh, the state's taking. Like for me, I'm taxed at 28% of what I make, right? Like I lose $20,000 every year to the state, and I want people to start thinking like, is that really needed? Like, is 28% of what I make, is that worth like having a state around? Would I be better to
And
control my own life? Things
the
like
other
that.
thing, the other thing I want to suggest is, would you guys not agree that things provided by the market tend to be of higher quality and cheaper than provided by government?
tend to be. I would agree, tend to be, but not every case. There's studies that show government's actually more effective in some regions.
there's definitely exceptions
what?
to that rule.
Yeah,
what-
there's
what-
exceptions.
What exceptions?
I mean, just for an example, they brought up the water example. That I thought that was a fair point.
Water, military, land allocation, rule of law handling. Private market would
Justice
not
system.
handle law well at all. It would.
Yeah.
Well, so I mean, I disagree there.
I don't
but,
think the government handles law right anyways. I mean, you see all these people going to jail for being innocent and shit. So I don't know what you guys are talking
Yeah, it's
about.
like 5% of everybody who's tried.
That's
is
arbitrary
actually
law. That's not
innocent.
natural law and cooperation. That's
You
arbitrary
see people
bureaucrat law.
you see people going to prison for, possessing a plant and shit like that.
I don't care.
I
if
don't
they
think that
possess
they
a
do it.
plant.
Yeah, well,
But there's
I mean,
other
whether or
things
not you
like
care.
shooting up heroin and stuff of that sort.
why does that matter? Heroin's
Why
plant.
can't you
It's
shoot
just
up a
opium.
heroin? Why can't you shoot an HIV infected needle and just drop it in the street with
Why
your
can't-
hippies
Because
and
then
into
you
your
start to
society?
infringe society's norms and impose costs, and that's a problem.
And all these things you're saying, like, I think people should be able to put whatever they want into their bodies, but then they also
But
have to
then
take
what happens when
responsibility
it
for
infringes
it. I'm
upon
not calling
me
I'm not
and my
calling
norms and my society's norms? Rights aren't the only issue that we have with this infringement.
Okay, so what you're saying though is like, I think if somebody wants to fucking shoot up heroin, whatever, I don't care. I'm not going to be. They can't shoot up heroin, get infected with HIV, and then expect me to pick up the tab on their medical bill. But with the state,
Well,
that's
you'd be
exactly
paying
what's
out of
happening.
Exactly.
So, like all of these rebuttals that you guys have, like there's some essence of state involvement when you're talking about them.
Well, we kind of want the state. That's kind of the point. We want the state in certain areas.
But you're using that as an argument against a political
here's the
system
issue
in which
with
the
that.
state is absent.
Here's my issue with that. Your entire ideology is, for the most part, founded on paper. You have to give somewhat hypothetical responses when you don't exactly have very many models to base it off of, besides a bunch of medieval examples where we have very few historic
I
records.
mean, at least a Marxist can provide something.
Britain,
Yeah, well, I mean,
Ireland,
it's good to
there's
say.
one.
Okay,
What do you
when
mean?
was that? When was Ireland anarchist? Like 10,000 BC?
No.
It was the closest example they've had. It was
After
the
the
closest
Roman,
example.
after the Roman Empire fell, it was about 700 or 600 AD until 1690 or 1700 AD.
And they were invaded by another government.
Well, they
By a
weren't
different
invaded. What happened was, people moved there. Britons moved there because
and they couldn't defend themselves or preserve their culture. That seems somewhat of a bad example because it seems to almost illustrate what we were saying.
But are you not even going to, undercut the fact that it lasted 1,000 years?
That's
wonderful. Native Americans lived a long time. They sat around fucking teepees and fires and believed in tree spirits. It's not a society I want to. A society I
I don't really care how much your society lasts.
That wasn't
about what your society does.
What I'm saying is I don't care how long it was there. I mean, what did they actually do? I mean,
what they contribute is what really matters more.
You do care how long it was there, though, because
no, I don't. I don't care how long the Native Americans were there. I know they got killed when people came here after a while.
We don't inherently care about length. We care about what actual contributions.
Native Americans also weren't anarchists.
I'm not saying they were. What I am, they lacked a state. They had a hierarchy. Not what I am saying, though, is the simple amount of time they lasted is irrelevant. Native Americans did nothing with their time except kill one another. So I don't really care about, for example, the Native Americans. I don't care what some barbaric group did while sitting around the teepee.
That's not really fair to say because we were just talking about the race realism and so Europeans, it makes sense that like they were in a colder climate. They had to develop these means and methods of fighting off the environment. Whereas like Africans, what you alluded to earlier, like they didn't. They were in a warm climate, abundant resources. There wasn't a need for technological innovations. The natives were much, the same way. They just did as much as they had to get by.
It's not really relevant in terms of what they're. You can replace Native Americans with X. I don't really care. What I care about is what they did.
Well,
it's a variable.
So a lot of this is made. A lot of anarchy too is made more possible by technological advancement.
That is true.
Well, I mean, just for an example, how long are you going to have to post memes until the state collapses? I just don't see it really taking off in that level.
And
I mean, just for an example,
I don't know why we keep going back to this because
an example, the Liberty Movement had a very big uprise with Ron Paul. The Liberty Movement took a huge hit and people left. They went to the alt-right, proprietarian, they went conservative. The Liberty Movement took a huge hit. It's been as low as I've ever seen it before. And I was there since like 2013.
How is it as low as you've ever seen it? In 2016, there were 3% of people in the United States that voted for the Libertarian Party, whereas
Gary Johnson, Gary Johnson is the guy that you're trying to tell me?
No. You're putting words in my mouth.
That's who
what
Libertarian
I'm saying is that the Libertarian Party has been around since the 70s, and it's never gotten more than 1% of the vote.
And it never will.
And Gary Johnson received about
this year. It got 3%.
Yeah, that's exactly
what we're fucking saying is that you have to keep educating, and hopefully next election cycle we get above 5%.
You put another liberal like Gary Johnson in, that's your goal?
Dude, neither one of me or Chandler like Gary Johnson. We don't like.
That's who their guy was. That's who people
voted
for.
Ryan.
Dude, what we're saying is that people are looking towards smaller government, even in the Republican Party. Like, how did Trump get elected?
I mean, Trump's not the smallest party guy. If they wanted, or smallest government, if they want small government, they would have went with Rand Paul or Ted Cruz. Yeah.
Well, I would say that they went with Trump because I don't want to say I'm like super against Trump, and I was actually, pretty for Trump right after the election, because he was basically saying fuck the establishment, and that's a lot of what.
Well, that's why people voted for him, not because they're anarchists.
That's fucking cool with me. I want people questioning the system, and then I want people diving further and further down the rabbit hole until they're realizing.
There's a difference between questioning the system and wanting to shrink it and fully wanting to abolish it at some point in time.
Well, we can talk about how
if education does not work, what is your backup plan?
Yeah, because IQ is mostly genetic.
Because genetics kind of puts your education to rest, really. It kind of does away with it in at least one respect.
So, say your question one more time.
What is your backup plan to education? Because you're putting an incredibly amount of faith in education, and while I definitely support a marketplace for ideas, it is not going to be as effective as you hope it to be.
Because most of it is genetic.
Education isn't the only deal. I was talking about like what I'm doing.
What else is there? What else are you proposing besides education?
Economics.
Yeah, I mean,
that would just be natural. Economics is part of education.
Not really. Like I think naturally,
yes, it is.
naturally black markets bleed the state.
Yeah.
Black markets or economics?
And
black markets are a part of economics.
I thought you said
but you really don't see the black markets being big in capitalist countries. It's more in the socialist countries and like communist China.
I'm actually being serious. You live in America?
I'm actually being serious.
What do you call the drug war?
What's in my statement? Black markets are significantly smaller in capitalist countries. Do you disagree with this?
What about all the billions of pounds of marijuana that's being shipped around the country right now?
Significantly less than socialist countries. I am not arguing that they're not existent. But what I'm saying, though, is that black markets are significantly less in capitalist countries because
no fucking way. Because
what the problem is,
have you ever looked at Marxist literature and read what's happening in these countries? What?
Hold on. Why are all of the biggest drug cartels in the world located in Central and South America? Who is their consumer?
South American capitalist? What?
No, I'm saying who is their consumer? Point. Who is buying?
Exactly my point.
Who is buying the drugs?
People throughout South America. Yes, some gives in the United States.
Okay,
but
you guys. Okay,
what?
The United States has the largest population. It's a huge population, not in the world, but it's an incredibly large population. Obviously, there's going to be drug users just given the population.
Why was Pablo? Okay, well, what I'm getting to is why was Pablo Escobar so fucking powerful? It was because he controlled cocaine shipments to the United States. Like you just said that capitalist economies are, what was it, less likely to
engage in black markets?
Yeah, that's not true at all.
I'm interested to hear that. I mean, you can look at many socialist countries where a lot of things were outlawed.
Soviet Russia, communist China, revolution.
There was for sure a lot of black market activity,
right? More
in the
than
Soviet Union, but that was for food. What we're talking about is we were talking about
shoes,
dude. Trust me, I hate like the Soviets and I hate all that stuff as much as
you're arguing they had less black markets, and that's just simply not the case. It's a baseless claim.
They had more because the state was more active in making things illegal and restraining.
Well, what we had said was that black markets bleed the state. And the bigger that the government gets, the harder it is to manipulate markets, like the drug market, for example. The United States spent trillions of dollars since the 70s and 60s on the war on drugs, and they're just losing money. And now a lot of people
they've really been losing money, but we have pretty high incarceration rates, and they're going up every single year.
And,
so it's not
and in doing so, they're bleeding their own revenue stream.
They just tax us more, so not really.
And
there really isn't a limited tax flow. You do realize.
That's my fucking point. Is that
my point being
they're
that
taxing us more, and then people start to think, wow, we sure are getting fucking taxed a lot.
Yeah.
And then education brought about by people like me or Chandler or any of these other YouTube personalities or whoever.
And you have what?
says,
Nobel Prize people to take you seriously on an open market?
What?
You have no degree in any economic or political theorist field.
Anarchists have
Who's going to take you seriously? I'm being serious here.
It's like flat earthers are not taken seriously among, for example, the scientific community. There's no.
If you held up a grow vegetables,
you're
and
saying
shake
you
the
want
fake
us to
sign.
get. You're saying that you want us to get state indoctrinated degrees. Is that what you're telling us?
Oh, they're all
Oh my
indoctrinated.
God.
You know,
State indoctrinated.
No, okay. So, what's your point? That like there's no
there's
Nobel
no
Prize
authority.
laureates?
There's no authority.
But you said Nobel Prize, like you're really putting that much
you're saying
on
that we
Nobel
have to have a
Prize
Nobel
when
Prize in order to be
You
legitimate.
need something.
Obama won a Nobel
How
Prize.
many people
like, for
honestly
peace.
take
He
Adam
won a
Kokesh
peace
How many people did
seriously
he
or
bomb?
Luck and Rose? Honestly, who takes Kokesh or Luck and Rose seriously anymore? Really? I mean, Kokesh practically put his girlfriend in enslavement for Pete's sake. And Luck and Rose is a freaking SJW
God.
pandering moron.
You're
So it's
I
not
mean, you
people
keep
are taking
moving,
you
you keep
seriously.
moving the goalposts, though. What I'm saying is that you want like Nobel Prize laureates. Well, Obama was a Nobel Prize laureate.
Do you have
for
No, I'm
anything
saying
peace,
is
though?
and
that
he
who in
bombed
society is
7
going to
fucking
take you
countries.
seriously?
Yeah, Nobel Peace
I'm
Prize.
asking. I'm asking.
Let's
Who's
get these.
going to take you seriously?
We hope
I
that
think there's
people,
plenty of
and
people
You
who are
hope.
taking
You
it
keep
seriously.
saying hope, but facts
dude,
don't care about your feelings. I'm sorry.
This is anecdotal, but since I've started this little Instagram thing, there's probably been 150 people
That
who
doesn't
have
cite you as
messaged
an
me.
authority.
It doesn't matter. We don't.
Yes, it does.
We're
That's
not
what
a
we're asking
collective.
for.
We're not a collectivist group.
You don't have
Like,
to be
we're
a
not gonna
collective to
have-
be authority.
Okay, you know how many
An
people
authority
have?
simply-
You know how? Hold on. You know how many people have read books like
Freedom.
Rand or Murray Rothbard or Hoppe or Kokesh,
Because they were
things like that?
actual intellectuals.
Okay. All right. Thank you. You
Even
just
if you
proved
want to
my
take,
point for me.
even if you
Thank
want
you.
to take Rothbard, he actually stepped away from your ideology prior to his death in 1995. He kind of backed away from it, actually.
In what way?
He became a pale-libertarian, pretty much.
I mean, I
And
think people
there's
put way
nothing-
too much.
If he changed his views a little bit on how to shrink the state, how does that totally discredit
Well,
everything he's ever
There's a
said?
difference between
Rothbard
shrinking
ethics
the
is
state.
terrible.
There's a difference between
sorry.
shrinking the state and abolishing it.
Well, of course
Well,
there is, but
yeah.
A paleo-libertarian, generally speaking, doesn't want to abolish the state.
I don't.
Yeah, no, I don't either.
Okay. So let's expound upon that a little bit. So, what is y'all's ideal state?
I don't have
I
one.
think yet.
Well, you've
I can
got
explain
to,
why,
'cause
but I don't have one.
We're talking
I don't
about
have one.
I think you have to be somewhat realistic with what you have. For example, Trump might not be my ideal candidate. There's a lot I disagree with him in, but I acknowledge that he could use a state in certain areas. For example, restricting immigration, stopping in refugees, things that can ultimately benefit society. So for an example, I use what I have. I don't have, Hayek running for president. So he's kind of not an option. And even if he was, what is his polling, So
But
you vote for what you have.
But what do you think the
want
role
you-
of government should be? Should it just be protecting from refugees? Is that all you're saying, Ryan?
That's
I
what
believe
I'm.
government
That's what
has a
I'm
role
getting
in
at. Is
protecting
that
from
like
parasitic
Chandler
activity.
and I are coming out and we're saying this is what we think the perfect government is, and you can shoot it down all you want, but I want you guys to
I do
rebut and
believe-
say this is my perfect government.
Yeah,
And then
Well,
we
I
can
mean,
talk
for
on an
example-
equal playing
Okay,
field.
well,
Because
okay.
right now it's
From
just
my
like
point-
a bunch of strawman shit.
Can I go, Brian, just real quick?
We're not straw manning you. These are your beliefs. You're an anarchist, are you not?
Absolutely, but
Okay,
like
well,
I
there's
want
areas,
you all.
there's things we believe government should do. For example,
Let's hear
restricting
it.
parasitic activity, whether that be through immigration, refugees, etc. I think that's one of the most important things that government should do is maintain a superior culture.
and what
Okay,
else?
so in restricting parasitic activity, do you still want a welfare system?
Ideally, I wouldn't, but it's not going to go away. It's there,
you
and
just
until
give
you
up
can
like
present.
Okay, but
Well, no. when
so
you present
Chandler and
something,
I
that's
come
great.
out and we say, look, these are the things that we want because of this moral backing.
You
or
want
whatever.
no government? Yes, we are aware.
Yes, and we both acknowledge like it's going to be very difficult to do, right? But
Yes, that's one of
what
my
I
issues.
want,
It's impossible. That's
what
one of
I
my
want you
issues with
guys
your
to do-
ideas.
what I want you guys to do is give us an example of the clear and concise role of government that you believe to be moral and that you believe to be effective and all of that.
Okay, well, I don't care about morality. I'm not fetishizing over it,
I
but
can tell.
Yeah, clearly you're not a moral agent.
No.
no, because you don't really get things done that way. But
It's
I
very
don't advocate.
Machiavellian.
I don't really advocate for any one type of government. It's not a one shoe size fits all with population and IQ respects, but it definitely has some roles to play. And I would agree that it has to regulate an economy minimally, in a sense, but protect the worker and consumer and the environment, clearly preserve property rights, obviously do property in toto, and not the parasitic Rothbard ethics you're advocating for. Military, market for commons, preserve rights. That's really about it.
Law, justice system.
Okay, so with the thing you said first, like with all the different cultures and things like that. So you agree with Chandler and I that we should decentralize authority, right? As in like New England should probably not be under the same legal code that the South is. And the South shouldn't be under the same legal code. Well, they're all different.
What I'm saying
cultures.
is there are inferior cultures around the world and there are superior cultures around the world. I think we should be very careful about which individuals from which cultures we allow within our society, as they are going to contribute to that society.
Okay, but you don't think that,
and I think,
for example, Californians might be a little more parasitic than Texans?
Absolutely not. Oh, absolutely not. I'm totally for, like, again, this isn't realistic, and I understand that, which is why I don't propose this, but I'd be all for removing California from the United States and deporting a lot of American citizens that show their parasitic behavior. Again, that's not going to happen, so I can't really stand by it. But yeah, ideally, that would be great.
I don't want to speak for Chandler, but I'd be completely cool with California seceding. I'd be completely cool with Oregon seceding and Nevada seceding and all of these other states like seceding.
I wouldn't. I'm from Nevada.
Oh.
I don't want to live in a leftist society. I need some form of. No, but no. What I'm saying is, I would be totally fine deporting a lot of people from places like California or really anywhere.
Like deporting them to California, or just getting California?
No, kicking them out of the country.
Okay.
Across the wall.
Okay. But so what?
I know it'll never happen. I know it's utopian right now in our society, which for this, I mean, that's a reason why I can't stand by it. It'll never actually happen. So I somewhat have to work with these people.
Well, but what baffles me though is that you can sit here and think, you know what, like all of these electoral votes and shit that are coming out of California and California governing, you know, themselves that way, like how you can just be cool with it in the sense that, like, oh, it's the system. Like they want to.
Not cool with it. I never said I was. I think we should physically remove those people. I'm totally fine with that.
And in doing so, like you wouldn't physically remove all Californians from California. You just disassociate yourself with California, or what are you saying?
If I was dictator, I would probably look inside. I'd probably find a way to get the NSA to maybe hack the registered voting database, and then I would have my military force deport all registered Democrats. I'm not even joking.
Why not just let California govern itself though? Like why not just?
That's what I was.
Because California is not going to survive without the federal government. They're not going to leave. The only people advocating for that are college Bernie Sanders idiots. So it will never go through. Texas wouldn't succeed. California won't succeed. It's not going to happen. All they are going to do is bring down the government. And when their single-payer healthcare system completely crashes on itself, the federal government, my money from around the states, is going to have to keep them up.
Bro, and that's what we're getting at. Like, you're right now, it sounds like you're cool with drowning and with California pulling you down.
No, I'm for physically removing them.
Okay,
well, you just said it can't happen. So you're just not going to.
If you propose a bill, I'll vote for it. If it goes to the voting bill, I'll absolutely vote for it. I do acknowledge, however, that's not going to happen. I would concede it's totally utopian. It's not going to pass. You're not going to get Democrats voting to physically remove Democrats. But yes, I would support it.
But would you support California, like, leaving?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. like
As long as we don't have to pay for them when they fall.
cool.
They would be their
And then
own independent state, and we have to build a wall around California.
I don't know
No
how
immigrants
much
from
you know.
California.
I don't know how much you know about California demographics, but most of California voters live on the coast in 6 counties, right?
Uh-huh.
And then the rest of the state is very, very Republican.
Yes,
right?
that's why I want to physically remove the Democrats.
And so say though that California secedes, like we had just talked about.
Okay.
Do you think then at that point that it's okay for California Republicans in all of but 6 or 7 counties in California to then say, no, coastal California, why don't you fuck off? Like, we're going to make our own little thing.
Well, they can come over here if they want. It depends on who they are. They have to be of a high trust individual. But I would build a wall around California. I would build a big, beautiful wall, bigger than the one around Mexico. It'd be bigger than the one on the southern border.
I wouldn't pay for it, but I would support it.
Okay.
I
will
if you
make
wanted
cuts
to
to
use
make
your
it
own
happen.
money.
I'll make cuts to make that happen. I'll cut somewhere. I'll make it happen.
Okay, so we talked about California, but like I want to hear, give me what you think that the U.S. government, in your perfect, like your dictator for a day, how would you want the U.S. government structured, and what would you want it in control of?
Well, it'd be a pretty free market economy for the most part. Again, California would be a huge issue, along with a few other states like Oregon, some of the Northeast as well. And immigration's big, of course. I do believe in a Federal Reserve. I know that triggers a lot of libertarians. And military, I believe in having a government that controls law. I'm fine with pot or gays or whatever. I don't really care so much about them as long as they're not being degenerate. Other drugs, no. But yeah, that's generally what I big. I'm basically I have a very big emphasis on culture, and
so would you consider yourself, like you said, law, and you said like rights enforcement? So would you consider yourself like a night watchman state, like a minarchist?
No, I wouldn't consider myself a minarch. Well, it depends on what you define a minarchist as. Minarchist can be very loosely defined.
Well,
I wouldn't.
Minarchism
is relatively authoritarian.
Minarchism is just
a limited state.
The government, the government is not just limited. The government is only able to protect rights. So it's in charge of the courts. It's in charge of law enforcement. It's in charge of the military and border security. Like that's all minarchists believe in.
Well, and there's other things as well. Like, for example, I believe vaccines should be mandatory. I think that should absolutely be mandatory. Stuff like that.
Okay, so minarchist plus vaccines.
Well, I mean, there's other things. It's one example. I think the CDC is important. I think NASA is important. So those are 2 other government agencies that I support. I mean, yeah, it's nothing insanely crazy with the exception, I guess, would be unorthodox.
So it's basically minarchism plus government science?
There would be government involved in some areas of science, such as NASA, yes, and medicine, and particularly things like the CDC and whatnot, because I've worked there before, not at the CDC, but I've interned with agencies around there. And from what I've talked to with professionals in my experience there, it's somewhat needed. Government's needed there to an extent. You have to have, there's no incentive right now for certain drugs to be made. And you could argue if the state just withered away, maybe there would be, but I mean, there really isn't. And there's nothing prohibiting people from making certain drugs. There's just no incentive, and it's somewhat needed. So I'm fine with the government, for example, funding money for drugs and whatnot.
So, hey, Chandler, I feel like I've been kind of, I hijacked this talk. Fine. But like, if you feel like you want to say anything, just let me know. But so you're cool though with, the government stealing money from, its citizens and throwing it towards like vaccines.
Oh, absolutely.
And towards the CDC and towards NASA. Things like that.
I don't want to get sick because you're a hippie and won't vaccinate your damn kid. You should be forced to, and if you don't, you should have your kid taken away.
Okay, but so if I don't pay to, the vaccines, to the CDC, to NASA, to any of those,
usually get your assets freezed. At least that's what they do here in the United States. They freeze your assets and whatnot.
So assets froze. And if I continue to not pay,
then you would probably be thrown in jail or deported because you are benefiting from society and you're not contributing anything. So you'd be considered a parasite. I probably wouldn't even pay to put you in jail. I'd probably just throw you over to California.
just toss me across the fence.
Yep.
Okay. So
And you don't want that, believe me. So just pay.
No, but so all of that would cost money, right?
Yes.
So you think that, you'd be cool with paying for people to
be deported? Yes. I would
get
pay money
deported?
right now. I would pull my debit card out right now to help fund some of that. Yes. I have no problem paying taxes for that.
I'll tell you what, you give me your credit or your debit card number and I'll get out of here. Well, after this is done, you can shoot me a message of your debit card
Well,
info.
you're not my first priority.
I'll peace out.
My first priority, you're leftist, not anarchist. My first priority would be getting leftists to leave.
Well, so a lot of what, I don't know if Chandler's the same way. A lot of what I've, and after I'm done, let Chandler plead his case too. But I'm completely cool with, I don't see a difference between government, between individuals or anything like that trying to steal my property. And so the moral grounds that I find for, shooting at someone who tries to steal from me.
I'm not forcing you to live in my society. You're more than welcome to live somewhere else.
For sure. But what if I own property?
That's too bad. It's within society. And if you're being a parasite within society, then there's costs implemented with that. You can sell your property and go elsewhere if you'd like. That's totally an option. You can sell it, take what money you want, and you can go over to anarchist Ireland or wherever.
If Ireland was still anarchist, I'd probably be there.
Well, if one pops up or something, then you definitely have that option.
I might just move to Somalia.
Maybe, man. Maybe.
But what I was getting at, if, I buy land out in the middle of nowhere, what I'm probably going to do is I want to buy a ranch up in northern Arizona. If I do that and I'm minding my own business, do you think that
presumably you're aware of taxation laws before you buy? I'm assuming you don't like it very much. I'm assuming you're aware they exist before you buy.
I'm aware they exist.
It's hard for me to feel bad for you when you know the terms beforehand.
I'm not asking to feel bad or anything. What I'm saying is that if I own this land, why can you take it away?
Why can government address against somebody who is minding their own business?
Because you are aware of the terms prior to your purchase.
What terms?
Yeah, what terms?
Pay taxes within society. You're not going to have, for example, deportation of leftists.
Don't get caught in this social contract, Brian.
Oh my God.
I didn't sign any contract.
Then leave. It's not a physical contract. I'm aware. No one claimed it was.
Why do I have to leave?
Because that's society.
But so you're saying I have to kick you? You're going to kick me off my property just because I want to mind my own business?
No, because
that's kind of oversimplistic, really, from what we're laying this thing out as.
It's not oversimplistic.
The state's going to deport you for being on your property.
Yeah, we'll just deport you. If you're not going to contribute
and infringe upon
steal my property from me.
Yes, absolutely. The only exception I would give would be if you were somehow, some way, just this genius entrepreneur. Maybe if you had a really big business, I'd be like, fine, you don't have to pay taxes. You contribute enough to the economy. But if you just post on Instagram and you're not going to pay anything, then yeah, I would deport you.
Why do we keep bringing up?
How do you morally justify that, though?
What?
How do you morally justify?
Because I don't give a shit. Because I don't give a shit.
That's our
which is very funny because you always criticize anarchists as being proponents. People, that's the whole common myth that anarchists all want violence and chaos.
I
and
think
stuff
there
like
would
that.
be certain areas where violence could be more prevalent.
But you were just now suggesting to kick me off my property just because I want to live and not
contribute
by
to
the
society?
rest of society.
To be a parasite within society?
I can contribute to society through buying things voluntarily.
You would have to buy a lot to contribute because there's other services around that you benefit off. You are shielded from. The military, for example, you have a shield of protection because of a military. If you don't want that, that's fine. Sell your property. Go have fun living in some country in Africa. Totally cool. I'm not stopping you. There's a boat.
Why can't I voluntarily choose which services I want to pay for and which I do not?
Because it doesn't work that way. You have a society upon which these things are agreed upon. Society wants certain things. The majority of Americans want certain things. You could argue whether or not that's right or not, but that's simply the fact. And
that's what we're arguing is, why do you feel like you have a right to tell me what I can and cannot buy? If I don't want
what you can and can't buy, you have to contribute to society. You can't just
stop just sugarcoating it and saying contributing to society.
Well, you are. If you are just getting certain things, for example, a shield of protection from the military, and you choose not to fund to protect it, I can't just say, okay, North Korea, bomb this one specific place. I don't give a shit. It doesn't work that way. Like it or not, you're protected by a giant shield. If I have a military base and I have defense against, for example, nuclear missiles shot up in the air, I can't just exclude your wherever you put it, wherever your property is, and say, okay, any country, you can bomb this place. Don't hit anywhere else. Like, that's
the military.
Why would that country bomb me though? If I'm not doing hurting anybody or anything?
You don't think North Korea would bomb territory in the United States if they were able to?
What good would they get, bombing that 500-acre ranch in northern Arizona?
You don't think North Korea would?
What economic benefit would come from that? Please explain.
You don't think North Korea would?
No, I don't.
You don't think they want to send a missile? You don't think they wave their dick around? Have you not been paying attention to foreign policy?
They have.
They want to send it. They want to send a missile into the United States because of the United States government. Are they really out of?
They don't hate them. They don't hate Americans. They hate the government.
No. Out of all their top
North
targets,
Koreans.
Out of all their top targets, do you really think that my 500-acre ranch in northern Arizona
in the middle of the United States, the country they hate?
But do you think my ranch is going to be a target? Have I done anything to them?
Well, what I'm saying is it's impossible for me to just completely not give you those services. Something like military protection, it's a continental thing.
You're paying for if you're not paying for service which you mutually gain from, and all in society do, you're free riding. Military, police, firefighter is kind of what free riding is.
But say I write a contract with the United States. I'm like, hey, any foreign country that invades me, whatever, I'm going to be my own sovereign citizen?
No, because you can't have a country invade fucking middle of the United States.
All right, I'll buy.
What are they going to do?
I'll buy my property in coastal Oregon or something like that. I'll get someplace on the beach. So
they are way too close to the United States. I would not let that happen.
Is Canada?
I would deport you.
United States?
If Canada got invaded by like the Chinese or North Korea, absolutely, I would support military action. Absolutely, and anyone with any foreign policy common sense would. That is right next to the United States. Why the hell wouldn't you?
Okay, well, I'm saying just give me the option to,
You do. You're totally fine to leave. In fact, I'll even give you this. You could sell if no one wants to buy your ranch, sell it back to the government. You just have to leave. If you're not going to contribute, you can go. There's other places you can stay. Though you're probably going to pay more in taxes in other places, but that's fine. Maybe you could live like in the middle of the ocean.
Saying, let me legally buy my land on coastal Oregon or wherever that I could be, invaded by a foreign government.
I'm not letting another country invade right feet away from my country. I would never let that happen.
Right,
if they invaded South America,
that sounds like your problem. It's like, if you don't want to,
yeah, it is my problem. That's why I'll do something. Because if that did happen, that would be incredible. I don't want people to look out their house and see their neighbor and their house just get blown up and have Chinese tanks rolling right down the street, but they can't cross this red line, and I'm sure they won't. No, that's not happening. And if you don't want military protection, you don't want to pay for it, you're going to have to leave our shield. Our shield of protection.
This is sort of an argument into the self-defense aspect of anarchy. Like, what country is going to invade a single farmer?
Why wouldn't they?
A single farmer, yeah, exactly.
You say government's so evil.
You say we're unrealistic, yet you believe that that North Korea is going to invade a sovereign piece of land.
No, what I said is you lose that protection. You lose it. So that doesn't happen. You can't lose it. So you are protected, and you have to pay for that. I can't just
No,
put a fucking
dude.
hole in this shield. Please explain to me how you put a hole in the shield to where this missile can go here and not there. You're protected no matter what the fuck you do. And until you can tell me how you can do that, then I can't take that argument seriously.
Dude, like,
It's a joke.
What I'm saying is, you want to set up that shield. That's
It's
fucking
already
Gucci,
set up.
But let me
It's
live.
already set up.
Let me live. Really, just at all. But
So you basically want free protection from attacks without paying for it. That's essentially what you're asking for.
Well,
Dude,
what a
I'm
straw
saying-
man.
You
I'm-
are
yeah,
willing
right.
to pay
I'm
for
saying-
it. You're protected. Are you not? Tell me you're not protected. And if you can tell me how you are somehow not protected from that,
dude,
then you have a legitimate
I
point.
wouldn't if the
I'm-
government wanted to protect me, that's their decision. I don't expect protection if I don't.
How do you
Exactly.
put a shield, if, for example, to defend against nuclear weapons, you have a giant fucking shield over the country. You don't just arbitrarily pick random locations. It's the entire country. I can't just put a hole.
So is your
right
only
in
argument?
fucking
Is your
Arizona.
only argument against voluntary, like choosing
free
services
riding.
you want? Is
free
you're,
riding.
no, but you're saying what you're giving me is the military. Is there
That's
any
an
other
example of it.
thing? Okay, what
That's
other
an
things
example
are you
of it.
saying?
Any service that you're given, you have to pay for. Military is huge. Okay, that's a
Should I
huge
have to
aspect.
be paid for welfare? Should I have to be paid for somebody else's?
No,
welfare?
there wouldn't be welfare in my society. I would end the welfare state. No one would.
okay.
You'd have to pay for common goods though,
Like what?
like the military, vaccines.
Police,
If you're going to,
firefighters.
I can't give you an exemption.
What about
from
firefighters
vaccines.
then? Like say, explain the firefighter situation to me? Why do or how am I still being protected even if I like withdraw and everything from firefighters?
If you want to withdraw and let your house burn down, then you can go get your water hose. But then
okay, so you're saying I can do that?
If you wanted to withdraw from that, I would consider it. My only issue would be where you live, because if you're right next to another person, you're putting their house at risk because morality.
Then you start imposing costs, and there's a problem.
Yeah, if you live in the middle of the lands and you're
do you guys realize what you're
Princeton.
arguing though? Like, you're talking
can't
about
free
you're
ride?
I don't
talking
even
about
understand what imposed costs mean.
imposing costs on other
Even
people,
what that means.
and
haven't
you're
refuted a word
advocating
of
for a
that.
state.
You haven't refuted any of that though.
Right,
You
because
haven't
the state
refuted
prevents
individuals doing it.
imposition of costs. If you're using the state to argue against imposition of costs, you clearly don't know what it means.
Say that one more time. Sorry, I was looking at my dog.
What does imposition of costs mean?
All right, you have to say that one more time. I'm sorry. What?
What does imposition of costs mean?
I don't know.
Then how are you using that as an argument against the state?
You're saying, well, define it. What do you mean imposition of cost? I'm not imposing
just
cost
said-
on anybody else if I live on my own. I'm not forcing the United States government to pay for my protection. Like they're doing that voluntarily if
That's not
they
the
don't
definition.
What?
But that's not even remotely close to what we were.
want imposing cost.
What are you even saying? What was your definition? I don't know if I.
You
heard
guys
it.
just said, what do I think about imposition of cost? What do I think about imposing cost on people? I don't like it. How am I imposing costs? I'm not telling the United States government, hey, I'm going to go live on my
Firefighters,
own.
your house, you're kind of imposing costs.
I'm not
What happens
imposing
if you're-
anything.
What happens if
They're
your
making a
kid
conscious
gets
decision.
polio or smallpox? You don't think he's a threat to society?
Then I pay for medical treatment. What
If
are you
your
talking
fire
about?
No.
if your fire expands past the arbitrary borders of your lawn and onto your neighbor, just not imposing costs.
Yeah, you're gonna have to pay for fire departments. I mean,
No, well then I would just pay for the damage that if that fire spread to that other person.
Whoa, that's not
You're already
voluntary.
impose costs anyways.
that's not voluntary. They
doesn't
never.
go away.
They never.
How is
agreed
that
you
not
could-
voluntary?
You can't burn someone's house down and say, "Oh, I'll pay you
Well,
later."
I didn't
I'm
do
not
it on
burning anybody's house down. I'm
If your
saying
dumbass
if my
knocks
shit's
over a
burned
candle,
down, then that's
How about
burns down your house and it
how about the guy that had his who is a taxpayer and pays for the fire department? How about he calls the fire department and says, "Hey, look, there's this fire that's about to come onto my property."
So you're going to have your
Help me
neighbor
defend
pay
me."
for your service?
No, because he didn't
That's
have to put
exactly
out my
what
fire.
you're doing.
No. I didn't say he had to put out my fire. I said if he wants to protect
That's like-
his property.
That is You're
There
literally
wouldn't
making
be a fire if you weren't imposing costs in the first place on his lawn.
you literally are making your neighbors watch your house and call the police or the fire department that they pay for to save your house so their house doesn't get burnt down.
This is just so retarded.
Well, it is. You shouldn't.
And
That's pretty basic. There's a reason why.
I don't know why
am
we're getting like this specific.
How
We'll
am
pick
I
anything,
making anybody pay
vaccines.
for me?
Because you're going to burn their house down when it spreads. You have
I'm
no
not
control over where the fire
dude.
goes down.
Brian, it's useless. Honestly, just let it go.
Fires don't spread; they just stay in one area. If you
Okay,
get
so are we,
polio, it doesn't
are we
spread to
talking
other
about if I
people.
like live in an apartment somewhere?
Anything, it doesn't matter. You're complaining about specifics. You're giving me specific. You can pick
I'm pretty
whatever
sure
you
that not
want.
every single self-identified anarchist lives in the freaking woods of the Congo in a secluded area.
No,
They
but
live-
I think that should be the goal for a lot of people is to own
To live in the
large
Congo?
plot of land. No,
If
to
all
live
you
in a
have are
large plot of
goals, you
land.
kind of need to disregard your ideology on a practical and theoretical level. If all you have is goals and principles.
If you, I mean, you can
I'm
use
not
it with
understanding it.
anything. Use, for example, vaccines. If your kid gets smallpox or polio or whatever, that spreads to the rest of society because you're a hippie that doesn't understand basic science. That's opposed
Okay,
to
hold on. When did you
objectively.
say that any of us are anti-vaccine?
And
Are there not
and
anarchists
when,
that are anti-vaccine? Are you
yeah,
going to force
there
them to
are,
get vaccines?
but
I mean,
that
if you support
doesn't
self-owned,
apply
you can
to
be
just anarchy. There's a lot of
anti-mandatory vaccine if you
leftists
pro
that are
Yeah, there's
anti-vaccine.
leftists. There's people
They're
who
already
believe the
deported.
government who are against vaccines.
They're
Dude,
deported.
if I
Leftists are deported. And
if
vaccines
my
are mandatory.
if my kid gets polio or whatever, I'm not going to send them to school. Like, why is that an anarchist thing?
You don't
that
have to send them to school. We get vaccinated so you don't have outbreaks. When your kid is sick, you are literally risking an outbreak.
Why do you think in
Dude, there's
anarchy people will not be vaccinated?
there is not. Yeah, there's
Well,
not
number one.
like a government mandate saying that you have to get vaccinated, even
Well,
with the
number
flu
one,
shot.
no, you asked for the ideal society, which is what I said. Yes, vaccines would be mandatory. And number two, anarchists generally, just from my observation, they generally think everything the government is doing is a conspiracy. There's a lot of them. And
Cap
another
Outlaw is a
vaccine.
pretty good example of that. Yeah.
Yes, and they think the government is poisoning their kid or something, or they're spraying chemicals in the air, something stupid. Which it's fine to believe in stupid stuff, but you're imposing costs on other people when you reject science. When your kid doesn't get, or when your kid gets sick because you didn't get them vaccinated. I mean, would you do it? Would you mandate it? Would you violate the idea of voluntary transaction? I
No,
hope
I
you
wouldn't.
would.
I wouldn't either.
I would vaccinate my fucking kid.
That's
I don't know.
fucking
This
great.
isn't.
Your kid isn't society. What are you going to do when outlaws?
So
kids
how about
like,
how about
they're
this?
putting
How about this?
chemicals in? And
There
then
is
his
an
kid gets
anarchist
polio.
community. Listen, there's an anarchist community, and inside that anarchist community, they have like everybody who lives in this specific area, around this property has to be vaccinated.
Yes, that's what I'm advocating for
So
the entire nation, mandatory vaccination.
So what Chandler and I are saying though is like before you sell your plot of land to somebody else.
Well, what if they buy a plot of land from somebody else that doesn't give a shit?
Okay, well, why do your kids being vaccinated
That's the exact
have
same
anything
thing
to do with my kids being vaccinated?
because of herd immunity.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
That's a big portion of vaccines is if a majority of people are vaccinated, the chances of an outbreak occurring drastically reduced.
Okay, but
And what you would have to do is mandate that every single property owner that sells his property doesn't sell to someone that won't agree to vaccinate their kids.
So are you saying that if one person, like say my kid gets vaccinated,
Okay.
but a bunch of other people don't get vaccinated?
Yes, you're at huge risk for an outbreak. Outbreaks are extremely deadly. It allows the virus to mutate more frequently. It has more hosts. You have more chance of getting in contact with it. You're at a huge risk. Huge risk. I mean,
Okay, so
here's
you
an
I would
example.
say you ostracize those people from the community.
Well, you would have to. How would you do that? If they own property, are you just going to kick them out?
No, you don't. Well, you don't kick them out. I would say that you would
What are you
organize.
going to do?
You would organize all the people, the people.
I already own property right next to you, and we're not vaccinated and it's a bad flu season or something, are you
All right,
going
then
to kick me out? Are you
No,
going to
then it's my
quarantine them?
voluntary right to say, hey, we shouldn't have any contact with these people because
Yeah,
they're
let's
You don't
not
necessarily have to.
associate with
Viruses are
these people.
airborne as well.
Let's get all these people who live in this community not to sell anything to this person and force them to move because they're not vaccinated.
But how's that
I mean,
exactly
it's
voluntary
airborne.
association and exchange?
Yeah, how
is
are
it
you telling people
voluntary?
they can't sell to somebody? I can't sell to someone because they don't
No.
vaccinate me?
I'm not
No,
telling anybody. I'm suggesting. It's like
We
it's
don't care about your
discrimination.
suggestion. I want money. What are you going to do? We don't care. We want money.
Really? You would sell to a murderer? Would you?
You don't think some people would sell to a kid that doesn't get vaccinated? You don't think some people would sell goods to them?
I
don't
think
know, maybe
if
some
the
would.
issue
I
is big
sure as hell
enough,
wouldn't.
then people will abandon their economic interest and
You're throwing so
go
much
on-
hope that you would persuade every single provider of their good and every single possible provider of their good that they wouldn't sell to them. Every single one. That's what you're basing your argument on.
Well, I don't even think it has to be every single one. If they can't buy goods, if they can't buy the majority of the goods they need.
Why? Why can't I go to another provider? They're not do you not abandon the idea of artificial barriers of entry? I could literally buy from anyone in an anarchist society, could I not?
Oh,
So
yeah,
I'm not
sure.
limited
Anybody who
whatsoever.
wants to sell to you.
Exactly. So what happens if I have this one company, I pay them a little extra money and they buy my goods? How are you going to do this exactly? There's so many holes in it. Besides just, let's just not sell to them about. You would have to talk to every single provider of the good, convince them, and then make them give up their profit for it.
I think that would take place if the issue was big enough, as you're claiming it is.
I don't think it would. I don't think it necessarily would. You would need every single provider of that good. And also, it better be quick. The flu spreads quick. It's airborne. You don't have to hug the person to get it. So it's not like you can just isolate them. I mean, that's not the way it works.
If I was a business owner, I definitely wouldn't let somebody who has the flu on my
That's
property.
wonderful, but people can still sell goods to other people. They don't even have to be on your property. You can order goods. Amazon delivers goods via drones now.
Drones, yeah.
Well, if they're in their house, then why do I really care if they have the
Because
flu?
it's airborne. Do you not get that the flu's airborne? You don't have to touch them to get it. There's a lot of
So
different
you're saying
diseases
it will
that are
go
airborne.
on from
Here's another
their
example.
house onto my
Here's
house.
an even.
Is that what you're saying?
Oh, it absolutely can. Here's another example. Let's say it can be transmitted via insect, and they get bit. That insect's infected. How are you going to stop that insect from maybe going to someone else's house and spreading it? Are you going to kill every single insect? Do you realize how preposterous this notion is?
Well, I think that this conversation is pretty preposterous, to be honest, but
Well, I think it's kind of a little bit concerning. That's one of the functions that we want in government.
Yeah, I think you're
Oh,
stressing so hard on a voluntary action that kind of actually cripples your ideology from getting off the ground.
That's another issue.
How is government going to protect me from insects and spreading malaria
Because you
or
get
whatever?
vaccinated, you don't worry about the insects at that
You're
point.
putting so much
vaccinated.
hope in
but
voluntary.
you just said there's not mandatory
Recognize the
vaccinations,
flood.
though.
There
So the
should
state
be.
has failed to protect you.
Well, in some states, there are mandatory vaccines. I think there should be. Absolutely. Now, we have other things, like we have the CDC that makes a lot of drugs and whatnot. But I do believe vaccines should be mandatory. And you asked me earlier about my ideal society. One of the things I mentioned, and you can go back and listen, was mandatory vaccines. And I absolutely stand by that.
All right. Well, is there anything else that you guys want to talk about? Maybe something a little different?
Whatever.
Are you pro open borders?
I am not.
You're going to privatize the borders?
What's that?
You're going to privatize the borders?
I think as long as the state exists, I'm not too worried about the state enforcing boundaries.
What are you going to do when, well, I mean, first off, you have to get rid of the state, which is one of the issues. I'm not completely convinced you could get there. What are you going to
I
do
don't
when the
think
walls
anybody
fall
is
down?
really.
No, I haven't really heard a valid explanation on how they're going to get there. But even if you were able to hurdle that, and you were somehow able to get rid of the state, what would you do with the border then, and the security?
Well, so I don't want to be.
Would you allow open migration?
I don't want this to be like convoluted and saying that I am like open borders. But like as long as you have a state, like one of the only moral, I guess fucking, like, one of the only
Your morality is
moral
going to kill your society, man.
deals. One of
It's
the
gonna
only
kill your
it's
society.
not.
I don't,
It's not moral.
I don't understand
One
how
of
you
the
guys
only-
are such against morality when you're a Catholic. It doesn't make much sense to
I'm
me.
against morality that destroys yourself.
I don't think this destroys ourselves. I think, if anything, the morality
I-
of putting all of your eggs into the state, like, that's going to.
I think if
be
you're
what
going to
kills
let
you.
in people that are, I think if you allow people in who contradict your ideology, you're in trouble. And there's no legitimate way you can enforce that other than advising property owners around the world that they're not going to sell to them. Around the world, you're going to have to tell property owners, don't sell to people that, believe in this or that.
Well,
You're
I think
gonna
that
convert apparently most of Islam.
Well, I think you're making that overcomplicated, but I do think that is going to be a lot easier in
No.
the
Fine, let him
future.
finish.
Mass communication with the growth of technology, it's going to be a lot easier to communicate through those kinds of things.
How do you solve
And
the
Chandler and
legalism in
I
society?
have both said that one of the legitimate functions of government, if you have a government, like, I don't want
So an
to really
illegitimate
speak for
government
you.
has legitimate functions.
There are still legitimate functions of government. Like,
Yeah,
you can
What we were saying
set up a government.
better-
You can set up a government to protect rights. You can set up a government to protect its borders, like national defense and things like that. But it also has to have legitimate forms of funding, and that's when you get into the problem that you can't steal from other people to fund this. It has to be voluntary taxation, and when you get into voluntary
That's
taxation,
oxymoronic.
it
It's
is
oxymoronic
oxymoronic,
statement.
and that's the point. Is that when you get into voluntary taxation, people would just pay for the goods and services that they want to. There would be no free riding or anything like that.
Right, but
Well, there would be
taxation prevents free riding. You understand this, yes?
I still disagree with you on that.
taxation.
How are you defining
is
as free riding? What are you defining it as?
How is, dude? Like, do you
I'm
realize
asking
what you're saying?
how are you defining
You're
it?
saying
free
that
riding?
taxation prevents free riding, but taxation in and of itself is forced free riding.
Yeah.
No,
It's literally
not.
yes.
How
it
are
is.
you?
Yes, it
How are you
is.
defining free riding in the proprietarian sense or in some utilitarian sense?
No, we are not
You-
familiar
you-
with proprietarianism. I am
Evidently
not.
not.
at
How are you
least.
defining free riding?
I am defining free riding as you benefiting from a good or a service that you do not pay for.
Do you not benefit from certain services, such as the military?
That
Because in
prevents
that
Am I
case,
free riding.
forced to
huge-
benefit? Is really what you're asking.
Well, that's not how you define free riding. You define free riding as receiving a good you didn't pay for. So if you're paying for the good and you receive that good, then by your own definition, it's not free riding. And
But this
refutes your own
just
argument.
goes back to what we were talking about earlier. I am not, like, say I bought that piece of land, wherever. I am
I
not
think we went over that
asking the
already.
United States to defend me. If the United States defends me, then that is its own conscious decision.
That's a byproduct, though, of living within the United States. You can't just isolate this one rant and say we're not going to protect it. You're automatically protected simply by the military being there. North Korea or any other government isn't going to invade any sort of country to get to you. Like, that's not the way it works. You're protected. The fact that we have a military is incentive against, for example, invasion. So you are benefiting, are you not? Regardless of how you look at it, you are benefiting in that
directly
sense.
benefiting,
But
even if you don't want to.
What you all aren't seeing is that I'm benefiting from something that.
And this was well known prior to you buying the property. I'm sure you were well aware that you had to pay taxes for certain things, whether that be military or whatever that may be. I'm sure you're well aware. I didn't force you to buy that property. You knew well ahead of time.
Yeah.
I don't feel bad for your moral case of like, oh, well, how can you knew that was the case. You knew you were going to be protected by the presence of the United States military. You knew you had to pay for it. And you want me just to feel bad when it's time to pay taxes. I don't. So I don't
No, I
understand this
know that
argument.
the United States military is there. What
Right.
I'm in becoming like a sovereign citizen or whatever, and me leaving the United States, I would acknowledge that the United States is then not liable to protect me because I am not paying any
Yes.
taxes. Whether or not it still does, like, is on them.
Right. I
Well,
agree.
it's not optional. They have, like, you're automatically protected by that shield because it is there. You understand that, right? You understand that that's like a concept of it. If you buy a ranch in Arizona, you are protected from any sort of foreign invaders because of the military,
So
regardless of whether or not you wanted to pay for it.
how about I put it on the border, and I,
You're
I
still protected because your house is right next to other people's house in United States land.
This argument, I just think
So
it's
if
so
somebody
redundant.
invaded your ranch, that would be a huge concern to the rest of society. They're
If it's-
feet away from even if we came to some sort of agreement, you are feet away from the United States government. You're automatically getting protection.
okay, but if somebody invaded Mexico, it would
Yes, we
still
would
be the
invade.
same deal.
Yes, we would invade, and
But
then we would presumably be.
What does that have to do with me, though?
Because when someone invades you, are they not right next to other American citizens? So is that not a security issue for us?
Maybe it is.
Yes.
Yes, it
So
would
you
be.
are protected by default. And if you don't like that, you're going to have to go somewhere else. If you
After
buy
the
land
fact
on the
that I've
United
already been
States
invaded? How does that work?
prior to you buying the property, once you buy the property, I mean, I'm sure you're aware of the
So
taxes.
in the future, after you leave, what are you in it? Are you at like UNLV or something?
No, I'm at a
Okay,
different
so
university.
you're at some university. You're gonna leave, and you're gonna go. In the future when you buy a house, are you gonna buy a house in a better neighborhood, or are you gonna buy a house in a poorer neighborhood?
Probably going to try for a nicer house given my financial situation.
Okay, so you're going to try for a nicer house. There's going to be all these people in this little homeowners association or whatever that's right next to you, and they keep their their houses all spick and span, and it looks really good. So it's going to boost your property value.
Well, it depends where you're buying your house from. That's not always the case.
Okay, but what I'm trying to get at is that you buying
what
a
are you
house
getting
there
to?
doesn't, like, you're not forcing your will on the people in that homeowners association that are right next to you.
I'm also not providing military service for those people.
So this might be like a cultural difference thing, but like here in Texas, there's a few homeowners associations that have like their own security thing. I don't know if
I'm fine with that. I'm not against people having
okay.
its
So
own community
if you
having a
buy a
service.
house, in the neighborhood that is right adjacent to that, like benefiting off of those things does not mean that you're forcing the homeowners association to pay for that security.
I'm not forcing.
Is what I'm getting at.
The thing is, where you're living, especially in terms of a continent where you have other nations that could potentially invade. I mean, it's happened before. If your ranch gets invaded, you're right next to the United States property. With the homeowners association, you might have a break-in, and yeah, that's bad, and maybe something should be done about that. However, it's not on the same level as an invasion, which is what I'm concerned about.
I'm talking about like safety in general. Like, are you gonna buy a place based on its safety? Like, my point of
yes, I would
bringing
like to
this.
live in a safe neighborhood. I'm not sure what that's
Okay, but
relevant
you're
to.
not. I'm saying that you're gonna live in a safer neighborhood,
That would be
and
nice.
whether or not the people around you or the cause of it being safe, like it doesn't matter for you. You're not forcing people to adopt better tactics of making their neighborhood safe. Like, I'm just trying to show you that, like, you, or in this case, me, free riding off of United States protection or whatever. Like, we could just as easily choose an example. Like, if there was an island in the middle of the Atlantic or something like that, and I thought that it was possible for me to, collect rainwater, or like to have the methods that I would need to survive, like, then yes,
Okay.
and I could be my own sovereign like
If
citizen, then I would do
if
it.
that's not my island, go for it. I don't really care if you want to live on an island. Just don't expect me to send food when you are catching fish that week, I guess.
And I wouldn't expect that. The problem is that like you've got an entire world. We've got this what's the term? We've got this paradigm where like every geographical location in the world is set up by a state. It doesn't mean that it's right. It doesn't mean that I have to.
Do you think there's a reason for that? I mean, if you want anarchy around the world, a universal political ideology, well, yeah, it hasn't been very successful. That's part of the reason why I find it so impractical. The idea that you would even get one is so, I give you very small chances, let alone every single one. I find it unlikely, and I think that speaks volumes on the practicality of the ideology.
But what I'm saying is that
stateless nation somewhere in Africa, maybe the government collapses on itself. Yeah, you can move there. You can go there. You can sell your property to whoever, whatever. You could just leave it there. I don't care.
But so what I'm saying, like this argument is like thinking human history. Basically, everywhere had a king or a chief prior to the Greeks, right? And the Greeks set up democracy. And then, like, the Greeks had democracy, most other places had a king and shit like that, and then the Romans set up a republic. Like, there's these different ideas on how you should rule your given territory or how you should govern. I just think that, and then, you know, the Americans set up the constitutional republic, so a republic backed by, you know, a legal code. I just think, and I think, Chandler, I don't want to speak for you again, but I think that the next step is, you know, everybody being in charge of themselves.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Well, I mean, those examples you listed off, they weren't exactly anarchy friendly. I mean, in terms of it being the next step, I would like something a little more than it's the next step. I would like to know how you plan to go about that. How do you plan to achieve universal anarchy around the globe? I find that to be incredibly unrealistic. Changing your form of government isn't particularly hard.
It's not about changing the entire world. It's about changing, you know, certain individuals, like turning the tide.
Yeah.
Well, eventually you're going to have a stateless society, are you not?
I would hope so. But I'm saying,
do you want to have the Soviet Union right across the pond, or Red China, or North Korea?
So, I mean, I don't see why they would send anybody across the pond to fight.
Isn't the government
one
evil?
homestead?
Isn't government evil? Isn't the government a monopoly on violence?
Yes, but
you're just talking about all the atrocities government committed earlier.
That is in their best interest in terms of their power and stuff.
Was it in their best interest for Nazi Germany to, you know, kill all the Jews?
It was in the government's interest because they were blaming the Jews for the economic crisis after World War I.
The problem I'm saying is they don't always act the way you think it is. Whatever it may be, whatever you might have that they want or whatever. I mean, you brought up all the atrocities that's been committed under governments. We've seen governments like the Soviet Union expand. We've seen them basically take all these other nations under the wing and control them. So I would say that if you want to have a successful stateless society, probably a bad idea to have a big government right over the pond. I think that would be a huge issue.
I just don't see how you think that, you know, China or Russia would look over
China's
at
already
my homestead and be like, oh, you know what? Like,
China's already taking islands in those seas, so it's not like it's not being done.
Well, I mean, that's why I think if it was just a case of isolated anarchy in some place, I think there would be a very high consumer demand for military. So I think that would take care of itself.
High demand for security on a small scale? What are you going to provide on such a small scale? What kind of military force do you imagine this small society would be able to produce to defend against some other authoritarian nation?
Well, that's what I had said earlier, is that as technology and weaponry and everything like that becomes more and more developed, it's more likely that you're going to have a decentralized power structure.
What do you plan on using exactly to stop their tanks? An assault rifle? What do you plan to stop their planes?
Okay, but can you explain that? Before we get into this, why are they going to invade us? Why?
Well, they already are. They already are in the southern seas, so it's not like it's not happening.
I mean, those are
resources
uninhabited.
And what? Let me ask. But
that's not their territory.
Is there government there?
That's not their territory. Well, no, it's government owned, but the government isn't actually there. It's government territory, yes, but the government isn't there. The government also didn't do anything to incite it. So it's not really about
territory can be taken over, even with government still there. Then I mean, what's the argument?
It's a small government. I don't want a small government. That's the argument. You're trying to compare a small government and say, look, that's what you want. That isn't what I want. That's a straw man. I don't want some small military with rocks throwing it at tanks.
I don't know when I said you wanted that.
Because you just compared what they had to what I want. That's not what I want.
If you were personally responsible, for yourself, would you really just have a big pile of rocks?
Well, give me an assault rifle. I'm going to get killed by the tanks eventually, I promise. You think I'm going to take out they could send 0.00001% of their military and I'm fucked.
But why would they want to do that? Just I still don't understand that.
What do they gain?
Well, they're building basically artificial islands, for example.
Land, resources is a subjective sense of value.
I mean, it's not like this is in theory. This is an objective thing that's happening. It's not.
You don't have to hate the government to invade land.
Just a really small tangent, just to like put things in perspective. Like what they're saying is like educating people. So educating people based on like your like to put individualism in your life before other people's. I don't know when the whole like give me liberty or give me death thing kind of fell out of American politics, but like I would much rather live completely free.
Well, I mean,
or be killed
when you let parasites.
You really won't ever live completely free. You won't.
Say that
you
one more
won't
time.
live completely free. You won't.
You don't think you would be free in an anarcho-capitalist society? Is that what you're saying?
No, I don't. Because your law system would fail.
Because you what?
Because your law system, your legal polity would fail.
Why do you think that?
Because you're using the NAP as the basis for your legal system and physical property, as opposed to
you don't think so?
Say
the United States tomorrow was just all anarchic. You don't think that people in New England would live a bit differently than people in California? Like water rights, for example. You don't think there'd be different laws having to do with a given set of territory that has a drought?
There'd be different laws, sure, but the laws would still be severely restrained from doing what property rights are supposed to do in the first place, which is address all conflicts and adjudicate legal disputes properly.
I can't really hear you. Say that one more time.
They would have different laws, I agree, but your stress that you place on a physical property would fail for property rights and the legal system to do what it's intended to do and adjudicate all legal disputes.
Why do you think that?
Because Hitler and Stalin get off free under the NAP, and physical property isn't the only type of property that there is. These aren't really
what did you say about Hitler and
because Hitler and Stalin get off free under the NAP, and physical property is not the only type of property that there is.
How did Hitler and Stalin get off on the NAP?
Yeah, I don't understand that.
Who did Hitler and Stalin kill themselves? Who did they kill?
That doesn't matter. If you order somebody to kill somebody, you're violating
the aggression, though. That's what I'm asking. Where is the aggression? Who did they aggress against? Nobody. They command people to do their orders, and that's that. They didn't actually aggress against anybody. They commanded orders.
It doesn't matter, though. If I
people
hire
obliged voluntarily to agree.
No, listen. If I hire a hitman, I still violated the NAP. It doesn't matter if I don't physically kill that person. If I initiate a threat, if I tell somebody to threaten somebody else.
But it's aggression against an individual's rights from yourself. The hitman violates the NAP. You don't.
No, I still think I would.
Whose rights did you infringe upon? Whose?
The person who I ordered to kill.
All four of us in here are agreeing that you would be violating the NAP by ordering somebody to kill somebody. So you
Rebel,
don't think
if you
that an
told
anarchist
Chandler to kill
society
me,
would
did
be
you
able to
kill me?
come to that same conclusion?
Rebel, if you tell Chandler to kill me, did you kill me? Who
No.
killed me? Chandler did.
You still have moral
infringed upon
culpability.
any
You
of
don't
my
have the
rights.
majority of the moral culpability, but you still have some.
Yeah.
Who did the killing?
Obviously,
Okay,
Chandler
both
did.
people-
Was he
You're,
forced to?
you're missing what we're
Was he
saying.
forced to
Both
kill
people
me?
are still immoral. Okay. It
Was he
doesn't
forced to
matter.
kill me? You paid him. It was voluntary association from you and him.
And that's where
killed
you
me.
would get me.
He
I
violated my
paid to
NAP.
have you killed.
He
How is
paid.
that- how
He
is that
paid.
aggression?
That is an aggression. That is an aggression.
Me
because
telling you
you're
to do
paying
something
for
is
a
aggression?
service. You're paying because you're paying for a service that is to violate the NAP.
But
that's
you're
not
not
an act of
aggressing.
aggression
Chandler
simply
is.
by
You see
existing.
what I'm saying in this?
I
You
really don't.
are not performing any aggression. Telling anybody action to do is not aggression. Saying do this or I will kill you is aggression. Saying do this and I'll pay you is not aggression. I'm sorry.
No, I think that's
Okay, so
definitely aggression.
say everything's anarchy.
In what way? How is
Say-
that empirically aggression?
If everything's anarchy and somebody pays a hitman to kill your wife or something, do you think that the person who paid is morally culpable?
Why are you so bad at morality? I don't understand.
So you don't believe in morality?
I do, but you cannot build a society off of pure morality. That's not how this works.
You're dodging the question. Do you
Morally
think that
culpable
they
in
would be
what
morally
sense?
culpable for paying somebody to kill your wife or to kill
Morally
your
culpable?
mom or your dad? Yes.
Are they responsible?
Would you want to see them fucking put behind bars or shot
Right,
or something
but
like
in your
that?
society with physical property, that would not happen. That's what I'm
Why
trying
would
to
that
tell
not
you.
happen?
We disagree, and
Yeah,
we're
This is
actually-
really what Doolittle outlined empirically, and saying you don't agree is not an argument. It's not a refutation. It's not. Saying I don't agree is what the communists do when I say that economic calculation is impossible in a socialist economy.
Okay,
Like,
but that's
do you hear what you're saying? 'Cause
Saying I
we're
don't
all-
agree
we're
does
all
not in
saying-
any way at all refute what I'm saying.
You brought up an example.
You
And
have to
every
do
one
better
of
than
us
saying
in
you
this
don't agree.
thing, in this little Google Hangouts, is saying that we all agree that the person violated the NAP.
That doesn't matter, though. It's not
hitman,
about what
right.
you agree.
Because I pay you, I don't violate the NAP. You're doing your job. Your job violates the NAP. Mine doesn't.
that's
You want-
You are committing aggression.
Oh, I have a
how
question
do
then.
you
I have a
get
question.
that?
You're
You
definitely
don't
still
think this
committing
is-
aggression.
You
The act
do
of giving
realize
money to somebody isn't an aggression, but the act
Why
of
are you
giving
yelling?
money something
we can all
because-
hear you.
because the act of giving money to somebody to do something that violates the NAP.
What good or service are you paying for?
For a hitman to go out and
There
him
you fucking go. You just
him
answered
killed
your
my
own
wife.
question.
Who killed my wife though?
What do you mean, who killed your wife?
If I hire a hitman to kill my wife, who killed my wife?
You hired him man to kill your wife to kill your wife? What?
If I hired a hitman to kill my wife, who killed my wife? It's a simple question.
Both people.
Hitman.
Both people made it possible.
Who pulled the trigger? Who put the knife in her chest?
Why does that fucking...
Who killed her? Oh my god.
Who pulled it?
Oh my god.
Who pulled the trigger?
I mean,
This is why you won't ever be taken seriously in any intellectual podium. I'm being serious.
Okay.
I'm sure.
Dude.
Because
I
this
mean, the other
libertarian,
issue is-
dogmatic, freaking pseudo-moralist point that you have to put on here is just absolute nonsense.
I think it's pretty nonsense. You don't believe in morality.
it's not we don't
When
believe
did
in
I ever
morality.
believe in morality? I just don't like your fetishment of it because it's not even empirical or rational. It's not.
Dude, we are
You're
trying,
basing
we
thing
are
on
trying to come
morality
up
instead
with
of
the
reality.
most moral, the most virtuous, like the best system to live in, and you
Right.
think that
and
we're just
Doolittle
gonna
said all of
push
it. Doolittle
morality to
put
the
all of
side?
it
You know
to
what?
rest.
Yeah,
And you
who
know
cares
what?
about morality? It just matters about,
Oh my god!
I'll get
All
some
right, let me
money,
be
right?
clear here, because obviously you're having some sort of mental impediment. I am not opposed to morality. There are basic moral principles which we can all agree on. Murder
Oh,
is
that's
wrong.
exactly what
Oh,
we're
so the
saying.
NAP,
That's
there you
exactly
go.
what we're saying.
Congratulations.
No, you
No.
don't understand. The NAP
can't-
does
you
not
got
cover
it.
the full extent. of parasitism. That's why it fails.
Well, then
I've
you
been
must
saying this
not
for the last
understand.
I mean, just for an
I've been saying
example,
this for the last 2 hours, and you don't understand what I'm even talking about.
you
No, but what
just
you-
talked about setting up the most moral society. That's the
What you-
exact nonsense, vague description we get from the left, and it never works. Just because
Do
you
you
say
have-
that doesn't mean you're going to get that.
I have
So
one
do-
question.
Just
The
saying it
moral
is all
society
we're getting.
is based off anarcho-capitalism. What do you mean it's vague?
How? Objectively prove it. Objectively prove your perception of morality is the most moral one.
There
and
is
tell
no
me objectively
objective
how the other
point in
ones are.
anarcho-capitalism, Brian.
So basically, you guys are all like, "Oh yeah, it's cool if you murder because morality is subjective." Right?
No, I'm not
What
saying morality is
even-
subjective. I
Do you have any empirical
specifically,
Well,
argument
you're
at all?
asking me to you objectively prove it.
I specifically stated perception of morality. Do you understand the difference between perception of morality and what is actually moral?
Okay.
Do you understand there's a huge difference?
Yes, I understand what you're saying.
Do you understand there is a huge variety of perceptions with morality?
I
you
don't think
accept that
there's a
notion?
huge. I don't think there's a huge
I wanna hear
variety.
that one.
I believe 99%.
I want to
of
hear that
people
because
agree.
I can promise you that, for example, Marxists are totally fine killing landowners and the capitalist class.
Okay.
They believe working is exploitation.
And do we think that
Leftists
that's
believe that.
objectively moral? No.
Okay,
But
here's
you
what I'm
want
telling
it
you.
in your
There's different
society with voluntary
perceptions.
association.
Yeah, what
What
part
I'm-
of Marxist
And how is killing people-
farmers voluntary?
No, not
Yeah.
that. The ideology and what it. If you are supporting voluntary association, you support socialists going off into their own state, collapsing your economic calculation, and coming back into your society and trying to practice socialism. You do realize that socialism and communism are inherently anti-capitalist and violent against the bourgeoisie, yes?
And they're also very authoritative and require a state. So I don't
Yeah,
know what.
they
And here's the
rely on the
thing.
state. Actually,
Your perception of morality means nothing to them. Your perception of what
Your
you
economics
believe,
don't matter
what you
either.
imagine, your NAP means shit to them. You can say all that all you want. In the real world, it doesn't mean anything.
so you don't allow them
Their
into our
perception-
society. What's so complicated
That's
about that?
anti-voluntary
So-
association. You have to deport them.
No, that's still a
You
voluntary
remove them.
association.
No,
If I
it's
don't
not.
want for them to be
No,
in my
it's not.
society,
How are you going to stop
If they
them from
want
buying
to
a
be, they
factory?
will overthrow your capitalist framework in order to name the
They've
collective.
done it throughout history.
Have you
What are you
ever
gonna do
heard
if they wanna
anything
buy-
from
You're
Marx?
even gonna-
Anything at all?
You're just
Have
making
you?
it easier by letting
yes,
them
I've read
buy
the Communist
property.
Manifesto.
Not hard enough, clearly.
You're making it so they could
Jesus.
easily just walk in and buy property if they wanted to.
Okay,
That's
but
how easy it
they're
is.
Marxists, but they're gonna buy property now.
Yes, they've
They're
done
going
it
to
before. They're
seize
completely
property
autonomous.
and turn it over to the working class and get rid of the
I'm
capitalist
not
bourgeoisie
saying they're
organization.
logical. I'm not saying they're logical or they're right, but this is what they do. This is what they
And-
do. They're completely idiots. I agree.
And what
I'm
does
not
that
defending
and what does that have to do with my property?
Because
It
they'll
has
infringe
everything
upon
to
you
do.
as a capitalist.
They kill
Even
property
supporting
owners. They've done
capitalism.
it throughout history.
And,
You're-
Bourgeoisie,
in their opinion-
you'll have
and
your
one of the
property.
one of the foundational tenets of anarcho-capitalism is that you have a right to self and right to self-defense. So
Well, have fun hoarding off a wheel of them. I mean, they've done it throughout history. That's what every single one of the property owners said before they were slaughtered. I mean, that's totally fine that you say that, but your perception of morality and their perception of morality are so vastly different. It's insane. What about, for example, we don't even have to look at just Marxists. We could look at people in the Middle East, a lot of Middle Eastern countries. Poll after poll believes that, for example, gays should be killed. Women should be stoned if they're not seen with men. That drawing a picture of the Prophet Muhammad should have you killed.
and what's the
stoned.
tool that they use to enforce their will?
What I'm saying
Violence,
is they're going to
coercion.
They use the state actually.
They will bring the demand for the state back, and you will not suppress it because you have no idea what you're doing with your morality.
You're going to destroy your own society. I'm doing more to protect your ANCAP society than you are.
Free riding again.
Oh my god.
Why? I don't-
Yes, how do you plan on stopping that? How do you plan on stopping the demand of state from people that demand the state?
Dude, if I
Well,
could buy
don't
a,
allow them into
if
your
I could buy a
society.
saw, if it
Very
wasn't
true.
How do you
against
stop
the
them?
state, then I would buy one.
How do you stop them? How do you stop them from going across?
Well,
Aren't
like I
borders
said
just,
before,
if I could-
I support.
We get it.
I support.
What are you going to do if it falls and they come in? What are you going to do when their shitty society turns into a bloody war zone and they end up
Dude,
fleeing?
if I
What are you
could
going
if
to
I
do?
could buy a machine gun or claymores or things like that,
What are you going to
legally,
do when they
then
put
I
a
would
pipe
do it.
bomb in your mailbox? What are they going to do if you put a pipe bomb in your mailbox? You think they'd fight dirty? What are you going to do exactly? What are you going to do?
If they put a
put a
pipe bomb in my mailbox.
Yes.
What
Do
is this?
terrorists
How
not
is
use
this? This is
explosives?
not even a debate. This is so
Yes, it is, because you're not providing me how
What am I
You're
gonna
talking about
what am I
pipe
gonna
bombs
do
in
with
mailboxes.
what am I gonna do with the state if they put a pipe bomb in my mailbox, man?
You stop them from coming into the country.
I
You
stopped
say
the state.
you are
that's
from the
proof.
Middle East.
That's
You're
proof
not
so
coming in.
effective.
Well, I mean, it's worked for a lot of nations. There's a lot of nations that haven't had terrorist attacks that have strict immigration laws. I mean, I would love to hear your refutation on that.
There isn't one from their side.
Has my property at that point? I mean, oh God, dude.
What are you going to do? Wait till your property is surrounded by a bunch of people that absolutely reject your sense of morality and believe you should be killed? Is that what you want to do? You want to wait till you're already dead? You're not going to fight through it.
I'm already dead.
What would you do if they bought property all around you? What are you going to do?
The Marxists?
I'm gonna defend myself. What do you
Against all of them? Have fun with that.
How do you think these people are so smart that they're going to have this crazy plan to buy up all the property next to this one
They
capitalist?
literally hijacked a plane and crashed it into a building. I think they could infiltrate your borderless society if they really wanted to.
And why would they want to? What benefit
Because
would they?
their country is war torn from their stupid ideology that they spread around the world.
So they
Whatever
would want to
country
make
they're
the
allowed to
new
go
place
into.
where they just moved to more war torn. Is that what you're saying?
Well, they don't understand. War is based a lot on culture, ideology, religion, and unless they completely reject that, they're bringing that with them. Look what refugees have done throughout Europe. Look at the terrorist attacks that have open borders. And I don't see any valid way you could do that unless you support some sort of private firm that has a border around your society and monitors everybody. And what incentive they would have for that, I don't know. You would have to check. I mean, I'm not saying not let anyone in, but you're going to want to know who they are. And if they're coming from a place like Syria, you probably don't want to let any of them in.
So let anyone in that I voluntarily associate with?
No, you don't want to do that. You don't want to let just anyone in.
I completely agree with that.
So how do you plan on stopping that?
I wouldn't let these people onto my property.
Well, what if they buy property right next to you, an inch away? How could you stop them? Don't violate the NAP. Don't forget that. You can't act acts of aggression on them.
How would I be violating the NAP?
If they bought property, maybe they were Marxists. I believe property owners. They hate property owners. They want to overthrow. They want to kill the bourgeoisie. Maybe it's Islamic fanatics that believe if you draw a picture of Muhammad, you should be killed. Their perception of morality, they are absolutely justified. Absolutely justified. What are you going to do?
Are they going to come onto my property?
What would stop
Presumably, yeah.
Are they going to try and take my property?
Eventually, I would imagine they would do harm to you somehow.
Okay, so then I would shoot them. And if it's just a single isolated case of me being the only anarchist in the world.
They put pipe bombs in your mailbox. What are you going to shoot? You go to check your mail from your private.
Okay, and you don't think so? Say in this utopian anarchist society that Chandler and I are proposing, say that this, threat is inherently obvious to everyone. You don't think that more than one person are going to be like, "Hey, we have to stop this"?
It apparently isn't if you're going to let them within your society. It's pretty obvious for me that it's a very big threat to let in people from certain cultures into your society. That's why I advocate stopping it.
Certain cultures and ideologies?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, and you don't think that would be obvious to people
apparently
outside
not.
of a state?
Apparently not, because you're not stopping them. How do you stop them from property right next to you?
So think about...
They're Islamic fanatics. How do you stop them? You have no evidence that they're plotting anything yet, but you know the probability. You know they're very fanatic. What do you do?
Okay, so say
don't violate the NAP.
There are multiple homesteads in this, example that we're using, and one of them
doesn't have to be. It could just be a transfer of property. Doesn't have to be.
But you're talking about force being used by these Islamic extremists or these Maoists or whoever.
Not to get in there necessarily. They could simply buy property next to you. They don't need to use force immediately. They don't use force when they go into European countries. Not right away, at least.
For sure. And then they do use it. And you don't think
how do you
that
stop that?
and you don't think that these other people who would be living in this anarchist society would be like, oh, hey, there's a threat here.
So you're going to deport all Muslims?
We should all band together, and if one of us, comes under attack, then the other ones will come to help. Like, you can't make that voluntary association with other people.
So your friend Tom next to you, a terrorist put a pipe bomb, for example, in his mailbox. Whatever. He opens it, his arm blows off, maybe even dies. What do? You don't know who did it. You know damn well what group of people did it. What do you do?
Then you fight against it. I don't see what the...
How? Who? Against who? Don't aggress against the wrong person. You're violating the NAB.
I would hire...
Just start killing Muslims?
I would hire a security firm or something like that to investigate.
And what would you do, for example, a terrorist attack? You don't know who the person is. Maybe he runs up to your property with a vest, blows a big hole on the side of the wall right next to your bedroom. Are you going to start deporting every single Muslim?
No.
No.
Okay, so you're just going to keep letting stuff like that happen?
No. Why? Why do you think that, man?
Do you not agree that the culture is inherently violent?
Oh, I speak out against Islam as much as every other person.
Yeah, we
do not see an issue with inviting people whose culture is inherently violent.
When did we say we're not inviting Muslims and Marxists to our society?
Well, how are you going to stop them from buying property next to you then? You might as well be inviting them if they're buying property.
But why would it be in somebody's best interest to move to a place where they're completely not like anybody else, and there's no welfare state?
Are you Jewish?
Am I Jewish?
Are you Christian? Are you against the idea that you should have? Are you for the idea that you should have the freedom to draw a picture of Muhammad?
I don't care what
absolutely.
you do.
What
they are very sensitive about that. They're incredibly, and they do it.
So they're going to move somewhere where there is one anarchist who doesn't support their beliefs. They're going to buy a property there. And they're going to systematically destroy that
society. I could see a society, yes. I don't know where you bought your one piece of land from, but in a society, yes, you should absolutely restrict the movement of those people.
And I don't have a problem with that. So I don't know why we're still arguing this. Who has Rebel?
How do you do that without a government? How do you do that without a government, though? That's the issue that comes about. You have no mechanism for doing so other than buy guns and hope you kill the right guy.
Are they coming onto my property?
They might run on with a vest of explosives. They've done it literally all the time.
And they get fucking gunned down. So what?
How do you stop? Are you going to sit there all day? You're not going to work. You're just going to sit on the roof of your house and pick off Muslims.
Well, I'm sure you could also hire somebody to do that too. Yeah.
They're literally going to have to stop them before they get on your property. You don't find that at all concerning? You're going to buy a full-time security team with assault rifles?
No, I'd rather not do that, but that's why we've been saying that we prefer a high trust society.
Why not just stop those people
from coming? You prefer a high trust society, and how are you going to achieve that under an ANCAP framework?
Well, I've already said before that I don't mind the state enforcing its immigration quotas.
It's gone. You lose it.
Well, then that's when it would transition. That's when it would transition into voluntary association of homogenous groups of people. And
so homogenous skin color wise, I presume.
Well, skin color, whatever. It doesn't matter. People, culture. I would say culture.
I don't give a fuck about skin color. Like, if you have the same ideology as me, then cool.
Yeah, that's what I would say.
How do you stop someone from buying property right next to you that doesn't, though, or a group of people?
You can't. You can stop them.
Yes, you can.
Dealing with you.
Do you at least understand that diversity in any sense creates conflict, and this conflict inherently creates a demand for the state? Do you
not diversity in any sense, but diversity of ideology? Yes, absolutely.
Diversity, but do you acknowledge that race and IQ and ideology are inherently linked? Do you at least concede this with genetic studies? Do you at least concede this?
Yes. Why does that matter?
Because you're going to be creating conflict. Your legal system can't even solve for conflict. You have no state to suppress conflict in all of its forms from the competing groups and their in-group preference, and it's just evolution just rapes your system, honestly. You don't even have a state to combat it.
Why?
It's not that hard to understand. I've laid it out for like the last 2 hours.
No, so why would, these other cultures spend all this time and money to move over to where I am?
Because their nation is completely shit because of their culture and ideas.
And so they're going to move over to this anarchist society where they have to fend for themselves just
Right?
to
Well-
fucking teach me a lesson about
Well, they're
drawing
not
a
all completely,
cartoon.
they're not all completely poor, I mean, if they're able to get in there, then that's a possibility that you have yet to provide any sort of mechanism for how to prevent it other than hiring a 24/7 security company or you sitting on the roof of your...
That's not what we're saying.
I don't.
Like, we're
I don't know why
saying,
we're
have the
still
right to
debating this though, because this is so unlikely to happen. Like, I don't.
Wasn't likely to happen.
Really? I hope
What's
your
likely to
ANCAP
happen?
society isn't in Europe. I hope it isn't in any area where you might have migrants.
And if you have migrants, you can limit them.
How?
I've already explained this like 5 times.
You don't
I
have a
know.
state. How do you do it? You don't have a state. Please, for the first time,
Well, I
explain
would-
the mechanism.
So if the state is abolished, though, I would have to assume that it's already a high trust society, because there's no other way that the state would be abolished.
Really? Because governments have collapsed on themselves all the time.
Well,
Somalia
and
wasn't
then
high trust
then
when it
that'd be
collapsed.
chaos. That's not what kind of anarcho-capitalism we're looking for.
Oh, your specific brand.
Why does this?
No,
seem
this
like
isn't
we're
like
debating
this isn't like a
with their
Marxist.
perfect communism. Jesus Christ.
This
Anyways,
isn't, we're
even
not
if-
moving the
explain this.
goalposts.
Even if you
I'll
inherit a
explain this
hybrid
again.
society, you can't maintain it. You can't.
I'll
You
explain
do
this
not
again.
have the proper institutions to maintain this high trust.
I'll explain it again. Your state's gone. What right do you have in your society to stop people from buying property, land, resources that very much so conflict with your ideas? The reality is,
And we will say it again. We have no right to tell people
you have
that
no
they
mechanism.
can't buy a piece of property.
so you have
No,
mechanism
dude, that's
to
not
what
what
you're
we're
talking.
saying at all.
You just said you had
You
no
think
right to
that-
stop them. Which one
Take
is
a
it?
sample group
I-
of 100 different. Take a sample group of 100 different people, and they all have their own little, anarchist homesteads or something like that. And one person comes in and he's threatening the entire system that they have. You don't think
What
that
if they
these other
homestead right
99
next
are
to
going
you?
to band together and be like, "Oh, hey,
Right, because just
So
one
you're just
if
going
any
to
of us-
automatically.
if any of us come under attack, we should probably
Or
attack
you know
them
what?
back.
Here's a better
And
idea.
if
With
some people
homesteading,
dissent and say no, then what?
here's another even more likely situation. They homestead right next to your spot. No one claims it. It's a newly formed little hippie commune. And, maybe a country nearby had war torn, and that's where the migrants went. And they're creating their own society. The first person isn't going to launch attacks. There's going to be few. There's going to be waves. There's going to be invasions. Not in the traditional sense, but in a cultural sense. And you're soon going to be outnumbered. It's what happened in Europe.
But what Chandler and I are saying is that you've got this situation where all these people are moving in and
They're buying land near you.
okay,
Homesteading even.
so they're buying land near us, they're homesteading, and they're going to come in and take away our land, is what
You
you're
don't
saying,
know that
right?
right away. You don't know that right away. They're just
Okay,
buying
okay.
land at this point. You can't
But
do
so-
anything, can you?
Okay, so then where's the problem so far? There's no problem, right? Where becomes the problem?
Well, there is, in my opinion. It becomes a problem when there's enough and they do start hurting other people.
Okay.
Whether
and
it be
so
through setting
are
up their own
you-
government or doing damage to you.
Are you going to voluntarily associate with somebody who commits harm
Do you
against other
think terrorists give a shit
About
if you
voluntary
voluntarily
association.
Listen,
They don't
hold on.
care.
I'm talking. So, are you going to
Can I answer your
voluntarily
question?
associate? Just answer the question. Are you going to voluntarily associate with somebody who commits harm against other people?
Okay, so let me put it this way. The
No,
people on the
hold
plains
on.
of
You
9/11
don't get it-
No,
you
I'm
don't get to
answering
do
it.
this.
I'm answering
Answer
it.
the
If you listen,
question.
no, it doesn't matter because they do it anyways. They don't care if you voluntarily commit. When you had the Boston bombings, did they go and ask, "Hey, do you voluntarily hang out with me?"
You just got to answer my question.
I already
Are
did. It
you,
doesn't
as a
fucking matter.
person, going to voluntarily associate with somebody who commits aggression against other people?
No, how does that
Are you
at
going-
all address my claim of threats of violence against
Okay,
me?
perfect. You're
You're
not
not
going
addressing
to.
the
Why do you
claim.
think that everybody else is going to?
That's so stupid. Do you think
You
rapists?
think I'm just
do
going
you think
to prop
people
my
associate
fucking
with
legs up and
rapists?
say, "Hey,
One at a time.
Islam, enter me"?
Do you think people are just say, "Well, I'm just not going to associate with rapists, so I won't get raped"? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. They don't
How
give
many
a shit
fucking
what you
rapists
think.
are you friends with?
I'm not friends with any, but what I'm saying is no one
Okay,
is.
there we go. That's what
There
I'm
we go.
saying.
Wow.
What the?
Do you not understand though? People don't just say, "Well, I'm not going to associate with these people, so these people aren't going to do any harm." That's the dumbest logic I might have ever heard in a debate.
Are you
I hope you
friends
concede that.
with any rapists, with any murderers, with anybody who is just
What does that
inherently
have to do
aggressive?
with anything?
I'm saying you're
That's
not gonna
saying, so
you're
because
not
you're
gonna
not
deal with
friends with
these people,
somebody,
right?
they can't harm you. No, you idiot. They're part of society. Because you don't associate with somebody doesn't mean they can't do harm with you. I don't have to be mutual friends with somebody for them to harm you.
So they're part of the state, like they're part of this society that you have.
They have land near me. The idea that
Okay.
you have to be friends with somebody for them to harm you is one of the most preposterous notions I've ever heard. I hope you take that back.
No, absolutely. You don't have to be friends with somebody for them to harm
So
you.
why
What
the fuck
I am
does it
saying
matter?
is why so why would you
That's such a flawed argument. Please try something better than that.
dude,
It's so bad.
why would you and a bunch of other people be like, "Oh, hey, those people over on
Because
that
what's
homestead,
not seen
hold
to
on.
go through
Those
your
people
head
over
is
on
it
that
doesn't give a
homestead,
shit.
hold
Guys,
on.
let him talk.
Those people over on that homestead in that commune, they're really fucking violent. Let's go do business with them. Let's go
Because
hang
here's the
out."
part you're not understanding.
That is
I
such
don't
a
have to
terrible
hang out
question and
with them.
argument. I hope you realize
I
this.
don't have to hang out with them for them to do damage. What part of that are you not processing?
Hang out, like
You
you don't have
think
to associate them with. You don't have to associate with them.
Oh,
at
so
all.
there's a magical shield around me so they can do no damage to me. They can't run into my property. Are you seriously
sure
attempting
they
to use
can.
such a logic?
For sure
They
they
can't?
can. But what I'm saying is that are you going to let that happen?
It doesn't matter. If they surround you, it's going to happen, whether I
I have a
try or
question,
not.
Rebel.
I don't
What?
get what part of
What's the
that's so hard
incentive
to
for them to
comprehend.
surround you and kill you and whatever?
You don't think they come in waves? You don't think they bring their culture, their family? You don't think they have kids and have a culture of that? It doesn't take very long. It's not happening day one. It might happen 10, 15 years. Just saying I'm not going to associate with you means nothing. Ted Bundy. People could say, oh, geez, I'm not going to associate with that serial killer. That doesn't mean a serial killer can't kill them.
Nobody's saying that.
It's not.
That's exactly what
I think
you're saying.
you have
You're
a different.
saying by not association with them.
If you would
by
just
cutting them off from
realize that
society.
our principles aren't applicable to an entire population that's incredibly diverse, this would make this so much easier. Instead of asking us about our personal opinions and conjecture as opposed to actual empirical arguments.
I don't know, but this debate.
I hope you realize that when you've done all those exact same things to Chandler and I. Like,
I don't see what part of that's so hard to understand. You can disassociate and completely reject somebody and not do business with them. They could do business with each other. That
dude, association
do
doesn't just mean like being friends. Like, are you going to live peacefully? Whatever. Are you going to live peacefully around people who are inherently violent?
You don't know that though until it happens. In your society, nothing
you don't know
can be done
anything until it
aggression.
happens, man. Like,
you can't do anything till an act of aggression.
That's not different.
I'm
that's
saying
not different
stop
with
those
the
people
state.
from in.
Yeah, explain
it
how
absolutely
that's different from the state, because
okay, I got one right now. Refugees. I got one right now. Refugees don't automatically by default commit or violate the NAP or any sort of act of aggression. You stop them before they come in. They don't have to.
Hold on one second. I gotta respond to this text finally.
Hey, Chandler.
Yeah.
Could I get an answer to this question about high trust?
Okay.
If you're confining suppression of conflict to just aggression against rights, and that being that, how do you enforce and maintain a high trust society in any way?
How do I maintain a high trust society?
If all you're doing is confining retaliation against aggression to just that of rights. And not
I'm not understanding that other part, but I can tell you that I would maintain a high trust society.
How?
Well, not me specifically, but I think the government is a tool for that, for sure. And then after the government is abolished, which I think will only happen if that society is high trust. You know, obviously, if there's too much diversity, then I don't think anarchy could last long. I agree with that. So,
how do you prevent diversity without violating the NAP?
And voluntary association as well. You violate that very clearly if you're trying to be anti-diversity to where it creates conflict.
What if I, as a leftist, find it to be acts of aggression to discriminate on me based on my ethnicity or where I'm from or
Well,
my religion.
they would be objectively wrong.
How do you objectively prove their perception of morality is objectively wrong?
Education.
Yeah.
Just don't associate with them.
I mean, laugh about it, but you're dealing with people. You're dealing with people based on individual merits, and I know that you all are still in, high school and in college. But when you get out,
so is your debate
into a
partner
job,
most ANCAPs.
Well, I mean,
You don't see very many
I'm an
30
ANCAP, I'm 24, but
okay, but most ANCAPs aren't 30; they're about 13.
I mean, Hopper's the last NCAP left, really, and he's
if you're if you're going to disregard people because they're in college or younger,
no, I'm not,
essentially...
and I'm not. No, that's
Can
not
you
what I
let
was
him
trying to
talk,
do at all.
please?
What I'm trying to say is that, like, when you get out into business, like, you deal with people based on individual merit.
not
You
always.
deal with
You would hope so, but it's not always that way.
in business, you totally do, because
Sure, but it's not in every single case. That's what your argument? Is there not male bias and white bias in businesses?
Dude, those are all, what the fuck, man? Those are all like individual preferences. What I'm saying is that, so in construction, in construction, for example,
you see what I'm getting at,
you're
Brian?
like,
yeah,
when you're trying to subcontract something to another firm, like, you're dealing with them based on, like, past experiences. You're dealing with them on all these different things, and you come to the conclusion the state is not playing a part in this at all. You come to the conclusion, yes, I want to do business with them. Just like you come to the conclusion, yes, I want this woman to be my wife. Or yes, I want, to hang out with these people or whatever. You're dealing with people based on individual merit.
No, you're not. Because there were Christian bakers that refuse service to wedding just because you're gay. That's not individual merit. You're libertarian. Come on now.
They're dealing with people on an individual.
They're dealing with people based on their sexual orientation.
They don't.
That's not meritocracy.
Okay, and that's
not meritocracy.
With people,
you have to realize this.
Yes, it's based on your own individual conclusions.
If you don't want to do
business, if you don't want to do business with gay couples, then you don't do business with gay couples.
But that's not based on an individual basis, like you claimed.
Oh my god!
How is that not?
Because it's based on their sexuality, not their individual
merit and actual ability, or IQ
is your sexuality not a part of your individual? Like,
well, if
you as an
that,
individual,
you could literally say,
yeah, but merit, no, not in any way at all.
Merit is completely subjective. Like, what I think is meritorious may not be what Chandler thinks is.
Your sexuality, your sexual orientation determines your merit. Objectively,
and that is what anarchist is like. Oh, I think that we should use a state or whatever to ban this sort of sexual orientation or ban this race or something like that. Nobody gives a fuck.
Even Hoppe, even your best anarcho-capitalist theorist, Hoppe, recognizes that to actually have a libertarian social order requires the state to enforce social conservatism. Even Hoppe, your best theorist of your ideology, is not on your side on this one.
Is Hoppe the arbiter of all anarcho-capitalists?
He was
mentored by Rothbard. He's practically the best theorist of your ideology left because Rothbard's dead.
And Rothbard, he changed a little bit towards the...
Rothbard was pretty much the only supporter who was actively in touch that your ideology had, besides Walter Block now, who wasn't even worth taking seriously.
And then you've also got... There's tons of fucking anarcho-capitalists.
David Friedman isn't exactly your best theorist anymore. Hoppe is a hell of a lot better than Friedman.
Yeah, much better.
But so what we're saying here is that you're judging people, your own subjective judgment. Like we all agree that, your relationship with other people is subjective. If you want to discriminate against gays or whoever, like, that's on you.
Right, but that's not meritocracy. That's our argument.
Okay, well, why don't you objectively define a meritocracy? What makes people,
it's based
sexual orientation,
ability and talent. That's what meritocracy is. Meritocracy
and-
immigration is not subjective.
Meritocracy is totally subjective.
Guys,
Is it not defined based on ability and talents?
I don't think this is going anywhere. So, I mean,
I'm still interested to see how you would your mechanism for stopping basically the destruction of any sort of libertarian culture.
well,
Education and black markets is all they've really provided, Brian.
Listen,
And we're not going to get anything more than that.
we need to have a more specific debate on more specific topics next time. Because
I mean, it's pretty specific. How do you maintain your libertarian culture? What mechanism do you have for that?
Well, I'd love to get into that, but we've already been talking for 3 hours, so.
Oh.
Holy shit, it's been 3 hours?
Yeah. So I was thinking maybe we could do another debate some other time on some more other specifics.
Maybe, yeah, we could maybe do a 3-on-3 because don't drone strike me someone wants to join. He said I was scared to debate him. So
I wish
want to
Nick
get him
still
on.
debated because this wouldn't even been close.
Okay, so
You want to try to get
let's,
Nick on?
Let's come up with a specific topic. So is it the defense that you all want to talk about?
Culture.
All right, Brian. If we have Nick, he can do that by himself against 3. We wouldn't even need us.
It'll be like the Golden State.
Who the
It'd
fuck is
honestly be
Nick?
overkill.
Nick Martinez.
Former ANCAP Nick Martinez.
Yeah, did
ANCAP
he
outlaw?
die?
ANCAP versus
No,
the
he's still
world.
alive.
Well, what he does he not produce any content anymore?
He just
He
kind of
doesn't.
left that because of the anarcho-capitalist fringe and then the Marxists. He got tired of it.
We'll see if we'll message him on Kick and see if he could join next time, and then we could get Don't Drone Strike Me, whatever her name is, on, and we could debate culture because that's really the undermining theme is culture. Yeah, there's other problems I have within the society that I don't think would function correctly, but the number one thing that would absolutely, in my opinion, be the kind of destruction would be the culture, and that's something I think would be fun to debate.
Okay.
Okay, so culture and defense.
I mean, we can debate defense, we could debate whatever, but culture is going to be the main portion.
Can I suggest another topic of economics? Like what would be more valuable to the society?
Sure.
All right, so economics, culture, defense.
Yeah, that's fine. It all kind
Okay.
of comes back to culture. If you don't have a good culture, you kind of lose all of those. But
All right, and
yeah, no, I'm done.
we'll see when this Nick guy is down, and then
If we can't get Nick, we can find somebody else. Maybe Pat could join.
who's Pat?
Or even better yet,
Life according to economics.
yeah, he's really good. The other one, he's really good. Let me see if I can find him. Oh, they're talking about it in chat. I can't remember his name, but I don't know if you know who I'm talking. The physical remover.
Yeah, I think I've seen his page.
I wish we got
Yeah.
Imperatum on here. That'd be good.
We'll get one of them on, and we'll do another debate maybe next time.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, cool. Hey, Isaiah, are you still cool debating the Black Lives Matter guys next week sometime?
Yeah, it shouldn't be long, to be honest.
No, Burning Media guy is an idiot.
I haven't even watched that debate that you had with him from a while back, or whoever he put up against you on his channel.
Yeah, no, he got some politician from Illinois on.
And then, I mean, looking at like this Resistance guy's bio and his page,
he
it's
looks
just
like an
eh.
idiot.
All right. Well, I'm gonna go. So peace out, guys.
All right, yeah, we'll do those 3 things at another time.
All right, sounds good.
All right, peace.
Bye.
All right, later.